Hello, everyone, and welcome back to DF Retro Super Show. I'm John Linneman, and we're back again with another episode. This is episode 12, and it's a good one, because today we're celebrating the anniversary of the Game Boy Advance, which launched 25 years ago, recently, March 21st, 2001 in Japan, a little bit later in June around the rest of the world. So we thought, similar to our PlayStation 2 retrospective that kicked off this podcast, we would dive in and take a look at it. But I'm not alone, of course. Once again, I've brought my two comrades. I held up three, but I mean two this time, unfortunately, because Audie's still not back, but hopefully next time. We'll see. But first, the man himself, Coury Carlson.
Hey, how's it going? You know, it's 11 o'clock Eastern time on April 7th. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, the world is still around. So I guess we'll see.
Let us hope. But who will never go away and will always be around, of course, is, once again, wearing the Game Boy shirt for those listening to the audio portion there. It's Mark Triforce Duddleson, the king of the ring.
Yeah, it's a Macho Nacho Productions Game Boy shirt, so, you know, I thought to wear it for today's topic.
That's good stuff. I love Macho Nacho Productions, so always worth checking out. But yes, today, guys, Game Boy Advance. I think we all have an appreciation for the GBA. It was a special little machine. It didn't last that long, but had a lot of cool games on it and a gigantic launch. So we're going to go through every launch game today. Maybe not all in extreme detail, but one of the things that, you know, it always annoys me on a podcast when you listen to it and they cover something like this and they kind of skip over the more obscure or less popular stuff or don't really give you any details on it. But I actually think it's important to look at each and every title because it kind of gives you insight into what the companies were thinking at launch. And the flavor of the platform can change a lot from launch to, say, a year or two or three later, right? So we're gonna talk about all that today. But first, it's time for, I guess, the news / what we've been playing or watching. Let's get to it.
Would you like a free Pragmata PC code? If so, MSI has a promotion you should take a look at. Simply purchase an eligible MSI gaming monitor or desktop PC, submit a review on an eligible platform, register your product with MSI and send in your details to receive your code. This offer is valid until the end of May or while stocks last. Check out the video description below for full terms and conditions and to learn more.
So the first thing I wanted to mention this week, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart. It came out originally last year, but it is now feature complete, and I say complete with a K. It's Mortal Kombat 2 for the 3DO. Have you guys seen this, by the way? Have you guys played it, seen it?
I've only seen you rave about it.
Yeah, I've seen it, but I haven't played it.
Dude, this isn't... I cannot stop raving about this. So basically, like, it's fun to see when somebody like brings a game of the era and sort of ports it to a different platform. But usually the end result is that it's not actually better than any of the releases from that time, right? But in this case, what this developer has delivered here is so good that if this had been released back in the day, I genuinely think this could have helped change gaming history to some degree. It's that good. This is basically like, it's not exact, but it's as close to arcade perfect as you could get on a console from that era. It is significantly better than what came later on PlayStation and Saturn as well with MK2. It's incredible. This guy managed to translate all the artwork, all the sprites, the data, the sound, crucially, over to the 3DO. And it actually works beautifully. And on top of all this, and this is the biggest surprise that for me, it's all 60 FPS as it should be.
Really?
And I say that because on 3DO, that system was not good at 2D graphics back in the day. Right? It really was not. And most games that ran in 2D either had tons of slowdown or targeted lower frame rates. Like Gex famously is a 20 to 30 FPS side-scrolling game, which is pretty bad, I'd say, for such an expensive system. It was 60 on PlayStation and Saturn. But here, no compromises, full frame rate, all the parallax scrolling, all the backgrounds, all the art. It's here. The sprites are gigantic. They're full color. It's honestly a miracle. I do not understand how this guy did it. Extremely talented developer here that really clearly understood the 3DO better than just about anyone else from that era, which is fair. We've had a lot of time to sort of study the system and understand its inner workings, right? Something that developers back then probably would not have been able to do. And clearly his passion project has allowed him to deliver the best port of Mortal Kombat I've ever seen. This is the best non-arcade version of Mortal Kombat 2 in existence. It's so good that I think it's worth just playing on a 3DO just to experience what has been achieved here. And
Well, I'm
not even
definitely going to
joking.
check it out. I'm going to check it out as soon as we're done recording this. Is there any load time during like Shang Tsung transformations
Dude,
or anything?
they've managed to get the loading time stuff down to like the absolute minimum. It's not flawless in terms of loading, but it's so darn close.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
genuinely shocking. I don't know how they've done this. And I'm playing this from a burnt disc, right?
Yeah.
Like 3DO has IDE or what do you want to call it? Like
ODE.
ODEs,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Which would be faster than a disc, but I'm actually just using a burnt CD-ROM on this on an original Panasonic FZ1, and it just freaking works. I mean, even all the music and sound effects, like you play this on Saturn, for instance, it looks awesome, but they had to completely chop up the sound. Most of the sound effects are either gone or neutered. The voice acting is toned way down, and the music is absolutely destroyed. It's terrible. Here, this just sounds like the arcade game at a glance.
Wow.
I haven't yet done a side by side, but close enough based on playing them one after the other. This genuinely feels like arcade quality, just about.
That's insane.
That's nuts. That's nuts. I think that's really impressive. Especially because there was no real version of MK2 that was remotely like amazing, right? They all
Nope.
had a lot of shortcomings. So seeing this like on the 3DO of all systems is really intriguing and like, I don't know, inspirational. It should be inspirational to other developers saying, hey, well, maybe I should see what I can do on the 3DO.
I have no
Maybe
idea
we'll
what
get
the
some other
3DO homebrew scene is like.
Yeah, it's not. I haven't seen that much great stuff from it. There have been some interesting developments here and there, but nothing like this. And this was available last year, and it's just that if within the last month, he's actually basically delivered the quote unquote final version, tons of bug fixes, optimizations, enhancements. It's basically as good as it could be. And again,
The full fat experience.
I cannot stress how much this shames every other port of MK2 in existence. It's that much better. And it doesn't seem like it should be real. So
what's the resolution of the arcade version, John?
So that's the thing. I don't remember the exact pixel count, but I believe the arcade version runs slightly higher than what 3DO supports, which is like 320 by 240. And as a result, everything's a little bit bigger, right? It's slightly zoomed in compared to the arcade, but it has this weird knock-on effect of making the sprites look gigantic. Right,
which is kind of neat, right?
We're not quite in China Warrior territory, I hope.
No, not like that. But essentially, it seems like to preserve the pixel art, they had to like kind of zoom it in a little bit, just by the nature of the lower resolution, as opposed to redrawing it, so it stays authentic. It's just everything's a little bigger, but it totally works. It looks awesome. When Scorpion, when you're standing there, Scorpion, his head goes up to beyond the halfway point of the screen.
Really?
So he's big. He's big. Right?
Yeah,
they are. It's neat. It's really
that is
neat.
really cool. I mean, I wonder if it was possible to even do some sort of Samurai Showdown or Way of the Warrior kind of zoom out as they get further away, but probably not. That's probably maybe a bridge too far.
Outside the scope of what this needs to be, I think.
Yeah.
Exactly. The one thing I will say is that he replaced the toasty guy with Trip Hawkins, which I think is hilarious. And also, I think it's the Babalities were replaced with Realities, where they used the Panasonic Real logo.
Oh, that's kind of good.
And it's Reality, and they like reference like other 3DO games, like you'll turn your opponent into Gex or something.
So he's actually thinking like, what would they have tried to do back in the day to 3DOify this game, right? Like this feels like lost concepts from back then. That's awesome.
I know it's so darn funny. I was like, man, like putting freaking Trip Hawkins in there.
Yeah.
That is quite funny, actually.
It's really, really funny. So yes, I'm smiling a lot here, guys, because I just like playing this. I think it's awesome. I've wanted a great port of Mortal Kombat 2 like this at home, and we just never got it. It was always just, if you weren't playing the arcade game, it was nothing. And even then, the arcade game has never been translated home properly because it runs at a strange refresh rate, right?
Mhm.
So in every collection, it's either got tearing or judder. It's not smooth. So you were basically left with re-arcade board, MAME on a VRR screen, or now this, which is a great way to enjoy it on a CRT, and it just looks and feels great. It's super good. So next up, though, the polar opposite of Mortal Kombat, if you will, the Super Mario Galaxy movie came out. I haven't seen it yet, but Try at least has seen it. Coury, have you seen it?
Yeah, I saw it. I took my kids to see it on.
So you guys have
release
both
day.
seen it. So why don't you share your thoughts, basically? I'm curious because reviews were pretty bad, I have to say. I was a
Yeah.
little bit surprised by that. And people say, oh, it's a kid's movie. Who cares? But I don't think that's a good excuse because
It's not a good excuse.
kids movies can be great. And we know
Yeah,
that. But then I
100%.
heard Try's impressions and he actually liked it a lot. So now
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing this in the next week. Maybe when I'm on vacation next week, I'll check it out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think Mario can be or even should be what movie critics want. I mean, I don't think Mario should have, some deep life-changing story, serious character development. I mean, you can have little bits of that, but
You say that, Try, but it doesn't need to be that. I mean, you just look at say what you want about the character, but you look at something like Shrek, right? That is a movie that very brilliantly appeals to both kids and adults alike. It did it perfectly, and it didn't need to be serious like you're saying there. And people
right.
still loved it. It reviewed very well.
Sure.
Mhm.
But I do think it's an exaggeration to say the movie has no story, no character development. I mean, not that there's a lot of that, but Bowser sort of has a bit of a, roller coaster arc here
For the first half. And
for
then
the
he just
yeah. So,
Right.
but
it gets
anyway,
thrown out
like
the window.
I mean, I guess my perspective is there's I don't think that you could make a Mario movie that would appeal to people that don't know the games. Like what a product shouldn't be something that's trying to appeal to the broadest base possible necessarily. Like if they wanted to make a Mario movie that could appeal to people who don't know the games, then it probably wouldn't be what people who know the games want, right? Um, I want to see how they translate concepts from the game into, a linear format. And I think it works, it's fun. And as with the first movie, I thought it was a good translation of the concept of fun that is in Mario games into a movie format. I was entertained, there was an infamous review going around. I haven't read it, but the headline was, worse than AI slop. And it's like, come on now.
Yeah,
Come on now.
That's a bit extreme.
That is extremely extreme. The plot, it all connected fairly well. I thought like there was a reason for them to go here, and there. It didn't necessarily trigger for me any of my like major pet peeves of like plot progression of like, well, it makes no sense why they're doing this now, right? These characters, went off on some completely pointless quest or something. No, like it all, had a logical progression. People compared it to a roller coaster ride. And I don't know. A lot of people were saying like it's overstuffed, like there's just too much happening too fast. And I don't know, like I as a big Mario fan, I found it relatively easy to follow. I wasn't overwhelmed. But if I didn't know this stuff as intimately as I do, then maybe it could have been that way. But I think if you're a lifelong Mario fan, it's not necessarily too confusing to follow or whatever. I thought it was a good time. It didn't have to get into, all the origins and stuff. So it was kind of snappier than the first movie in a lot of ways. I'm not going to say it's a masterpiece or anything, but it's a solid piece of entertainment. I don't have any.
How was
issue with
Yoshi,
it.
by the way?
Yoshi was one of the better parts, I thought, actually. And they, in a lot of ways, like probably the most accurate to how he is in the games. I kind of liked that he just kind of becomes a part of the team. They have like kind of a funny moment showing his backstory of how he got there. But since all he could say is Yoshi, like, it doesn't mean anything to them. So he just kind of becomes part of the group. There's a little, which is Donald Glover, kind of a very well-lauded actor. And he's just saying Yoshi, much like Vin Diesel is just saying, I am Groot. But I like, there's a little tension with Toad, because Toad's just like, oh, I guess Yoshi's part of the group now. He sort of feels a little sidelined by Yoshi. But aside from that, like, it's not a big deal. Like, Yoshi's just another one of their friends and is just there. Yeah, he doesn't like talk. Like, he doesn't become a major character or anything. I honestly liked how they just seamlessly integrate him with relatively minimal story. Like, I don't think Yoshi needed to be, some big crazy backstory thing. I think things like that worked in this context for me.
I kind of wish they had used the Super NES Yoshi sound effect instead of a voice.
There might have been at some point like some Yoshi sound like that, but yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the Yoshi myself, but that's kind of what it's become, so I accept that.
For my take is I thought it was pretty good. It was entertaining to watch. I mean, I think that Fox McCloud owns the movie for the amount of time that he's in it, and that's my biggest takeaway is that what I want more than anything else is just a standalone Star Fox movie. And the music also is fantastic in this movie, and it only has a couple of little bits of licensed needle drop music, but without any lyrics, which is fine.
It fits,
but there's just like little motifs.
The movie much
better.
Right.
Yeah.
And Fox McCloud, he has, they even use stuff from the original Star Fox. I think that the music in the original Star Fox is so much better than Star Fox 64. So just hearing like that, little bits of that Corneria theme in the ending music was fantastic. But just in general, I thought it was entertaining and in a good time, but I don't feel really compelled to say like, oh, I need to watch it again, and I think in general, I think I maybe liked the first one more, but it was nice to see how much stuff they threw in there, and I do feel it was overstuffed, but it seems like they just said, okay, so we just need to have like these like action beats every 5 minutes. So what are we going to do? And it made me feel a lot like Rise of Skywalker was kind of like that, where they just had these action beats with really, they just needed some quiet moments with the characters hanging out and talking. And this has a little bit of that. It has more of that than Rise of Skywalker did, for sure.
There's definitely a lot more, they really weren't afraid this time, especially with Peach, to just like have her do her Smash Brothers moves like a lot. So, there's definitely a lot of kind of just Smash Brothers style, fighting going on. From a more technical perspective, I noticed at least toward the end, it could have happened earlier on as well, but like right at the end, there is a pixel art scene that had some non-integer scaling.
I saw that shimmer and I was like,
try.
It's like this is happening. This happened in this movie. That there is pixel shimmer in this movie.
Yeah, they like just couldn't. Like they just couldn't do it. They couldn't figure it out. Give me a call, okay?
But it's funny. Like John's like, oh my goodness. But if you had seen it, you'd notice it too. We are cursed with the knowledge, as I like to say. It's like that. What was that? The movie The Console Wars movie, where all the scan lines are vertical in that movie for some reason.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why they did that.
Dude. Yeah, it's not good, dude. I agree. Very, very annoying.
Give us a call next time, okay?
All right. I mean, that actually sounds kind of all right. And I'm definitely gonna go check it out. Although I'm a little bit worried when you say you liked it less than the first one, because the first one I liked it only on first view, and then after that I just felt like, wow, there's really nothing here. It's
to
just
be
a bunch
fair,
of visuals.
I only watched the first one twice.
Okay.
And I think that the second time I was checked out in the same way, where I'm just like looking for things like, oh, what are some little things that I didn't pick up on? I mean, I don't think that anybody should watch these for, like plot, but you're right, John, is that we should expect more. We should expect them to do something more. And I'm hoping that maybe the feedback from this will result in a little bit of that, because there is character development there that can happen. I mean, the first one had character development, with them kind of coming to terms and with what they were doing, and also being essentially like failures in the real world, right? So there wasn't a lot of that here. I mean, and I don't know. I feel like it should have had more Rosalina. Like, she's barely in the movie, which is weird. I mean, we could talk for an entire podcast probably.
I will say Bowser Jr. Normally don't like Bowser Jr. Totally fine here.
All right, that's cool. That sounds good. All right, I will check it out then, and I'll let you guys know what I think. But one last piece of news I wanted to mention here actually is PlayStation 3. You guys like the PlayStation 3, right?
I do.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Well, apparently there has been groundbreaking advancements made in the world of PS3 emulation, specifically in regards to the SPUs, which has been the most difficult part for our PCS3 developers at this point. It's the element of the system that's the heaviest. And the SPUs, for those wondering, it's essentially like, think of it, it's sort of like hyper specific cores on a CPU, where you have your primary core and you have the 7 SPUs. They're like stream processors, these like very fast math focused processors that were used for a lot of things within the cell processor on PS3. It was basically a way that developers kind of had to make up for the rather slow RSX GPU in the PS3. But unfortunately, it didn't translate that well to PC emulation, and it requires significantly more CPU grunt to crunch through it. So any games that had heavy SPU usage tended to require much beefier machines. It's the reason why you could emulate a simple game on a low spec piece of hardware, but more complex PS3 games are basically a slideshow on the same machine. Just the requirements were that variable. So yeah, I'm happy that has been made. The game they showed being tested here was actually Twisted Metal, if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently that was one of the heaviest games in terms of SPU usage out there. Went absolutely crazy with it, and they're seeing a 5 to 7% boost in performance, which is not insignificant. That's great. So PS3 emulation, I think, is really, really cool. It's continuing to improve. I even installed it on a base spec Mac Mini that I have on my desk and was able to play some games like Bionic Commando Rearmed at full speed on there, which is great because the PC version doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And, you can enjoy it with sharper visuals, and it runs great even on a lower spec machine.
I mean, you think that this is something that Sony would be able to take advantage of for PS3 emulation if whatever happens? I mean, I don't know if that's something that they would be able to do in a roundabout way for their own uses.
I mean, there is a history of tapping into what hobbyists have done to a degree, but I'm not confident we would necessarily see that. But
okay.
My dream, I proposed this on DF Direct Q&A this week, actually. It's like, we were talking about the PlayStation 6. It's like, how do you make the PS6 exciting again? And I thought one thing, not the sole focus, obviously, but imagine if the PS6 was a celebration of all PlayStation, right? Where it could play all generations of PlayStation, including PlayStation 3, on one machine. I feel like something like that would be extremely compelling and a big selling point, and it would allow them to plumb the depths of their back catalog more easily.
Although I have my doubts about how they would handle PS1 and PS2 on there because I
Sure,
doubt
I
it would
know.
improve beyond what they're doing on PS5
Right.
right now.
Well, I don't know. I think it might because the stuff out now is done by like a third party company, right? And
Right.
this could be, if this was a hardware function, that would be handled by a different team internally developing the system. It wouldn't
You would
just be
hope so, but
outsourced.
who could say? I mean,
Right. But
if they can't get pixel scaling right in the Super Mario Galaxy movie, who's to say first party Sony is going to get it right either?
true, true.
Yeah, but they have updated the emulators that those are working on. I've gotten updates for a lot of the PS2 classics and stuff, and PS1 classics on the PS5. So, I mean, they're open to it. But I mean, that would be a good way for them to kind of cap off, which could realistically be the last generation of consoles.
That's
You know,
my
make
fear.
this-
It does at least seem like optical drives are still in. So it's just going to be like a
okay.
PS5 Pro Slim situation where it's an add-on unit instead, which simplifies their manufacturing anyway.
Mhm.
So, all right. But anyway, I think that's all for the news this week, gents. So let's go ahead and get to the main topic. "25 years, the Game Boy Advance. What an awesome little machine. This little 32-bit, beautifully designed piece of hardware was Nintendo's first attempt at a true next-generation successor to its very popular Game Boy. You guys, I'm sure, were there early on.
Yeah, it was.
I was there launch day.
It was
in the
the
US.
first. It was the first launch that I participated in.
That's awesome. So yeah, today I wanted to go through some of its legacy history and then touch on all the various launch titles across the different regions because there's a lot and they're trying so many different things. It's super, super interesting. And it shows how far gaming had come since the original Game Boy launch, which of course this is the sequel to, because that original from 1989, the whole reason for its success really seems to have come down to finding this brilliant design that was simple enough, a Z80 based kind of processor, very cheap components, cheap to manufacture for the time, but it was enough to kind of sip batteries so that it was like a real good portable machine with an exchangeable cartridge system. It wasn't the first to do it. I think there was the Epoch game computer, was it? Before that, there was an earlier swappable cartridge system that didn't find much success, but the Game Boy obviously was a big hit. I actually discovered something new about it though. I was listening to, before we get to GBA, uh, a, one of my other favorite retro podcasts, if I give them a little shout out, the Bright Bit Brothers, which is a Japanese language retro podcast. They often reveal things on there that I wasn't aware of from the other media that I've read over the years. And one of the things that they said on that is that when the Game Boy was still in development, it used an older type of like TN based LCD screen. And it was actually in manufacturing at that point, but they showed it to Yamauchi-san, the Yamauchi-san,
Mhm.
and he couldn't actually see the screen at all. And apparently, not being able to see the screen, it sent Yokoi-san into like a total panic. And there's like talk of him like going to this big dinner and just like eating nothing. He's just completely consumed by anxiety
Wow.
over this, but ends up finding a solution in the form of an STN style panel, which is still a very cheap panel, but TN versus STN. There's actually mods for like old 80s watches where you could take it from like TN to STN and you see a dramatic difference. But this reflective STN panel in the actual Game Boy is a lot more visible. It's easier to see with no direct lighting versus what they were originally going to do on the Game Boy. So presumably there was a bunch of models out there with this even older type of LCD screen that you can't really see very well that got scrapped. We don't need to go over the whole history, but Game Boy smash hit, huge success. First system I ever bought with my own money that I saved up from cutting grass. So I was very happy to do that at the time. I loved it. I played so much Game Boy back then. It was really a great little machine. It was great because back then, I had a black and white TV in my room, but it wasn't suitable for video games. And the main living room TV was often tied up by others. So this was a great way to play video games anywhere, including in my room or on the go.
I
So
loved the Game Boy back then, but I'll admit, by this point, I was getting pretty tired of it. And the Game Boy Color, I know it's got a lot of really big fans, and it's pretty cool piece of hardware. But I felt like it never really hit that great for me. It's exclusive games, like it's got some great exclusives, but it never really became a platform unto itself, in my opinion. It was kind of just a band-aid on the problem of the Game Boy becoming really, really long in the tooth. And so I was hungry for a true advancement.
I yes, indeed. And I think the reason that the Game Boy went on for so long and then the Game Boy Color release probably comes down to Pokemon, which was like that's always the wisdom you hear, right? Is that the sudden success of Pokemon essentially massively increased the lifespan of the Game Boy hardware, led to the Game Boy Color, which Nintendo seemed to not want to tackle color for a long time. But before the launch of Game Boy Color, and we know this now from a GDC talk some years back, Nintendo actually started something called Project Atlantis, which there's one existing picture that I've seen of it that was shown, I guess, on a slide with the Atlantis next to a DS Lite. And it is a big machine. It is significantly bigger than the DS Lite. It's got 4 face buttons and a D-pad. I think Try, you commented it kind of looks like an analog pocket. It's
It
like a big
kind
analog
of
pocket.
does. Yeah, except
Yeah.
the buttons are like kind of a little bit in a sort of a weird slanted angle, like almost makes me think of like the Xbox Duke, how those buttons were kind of in a strange sort of
You got to hold it weird, like yeah.
offset arrangement. Yeah, but like gosh, from this picture it looks like it's encroaching on like Atari Lynx size.
Y-
Probably
Yeah,
smaller than that, but it
maybe.
looks pretty chunky.
But the idea is that they wanted to build this 32-bit RISC-based system with a color LCD screen. It has supposedly had a link port on it, which seemed to be related to Nintendo 64 as well. And in fact, this stems from the same era as Nintendo 64's hardware design. So these kind of would have been stable mates, and that kind of explains maybe some of the curves on the machine and some of the color choices there, which feels very N64, I might say. But needless to say, that never actually shipped. It was canned and gone. But it is widely recognized as the predecessor to the Game Boy Advance, which I believe was officially announced in 1999. At least it was indicated that yes, there's actually a successor in development now.
Which is surprising that they announced it that early because, I mean, they obviously wanted the Game Boy Color to sell, and I think it was selling, right? I mean, uh, my impression has always been that it was a success.
Sure, yeah. And but the thing is like Game Boy Color was a success, but it was launching into a very strange, very tumultuous market, right? So it was announced at Space World 99, Shoshinkai, right? And uh we have to keep in mind what was happening elsewhere in the industry at this time because there was other competition. Not a big deal, I suppose, but Neo Geo Pocket Color, or the original Pocket as it was called, the black and white one in Japan, that was hitting the market and was shaping up to be an interesting system. But it was actually the Gunpei Yokoi developed a Wonder Swan that I think was really sort of taking a lot of interest because this had Bandai behind it. So you take the original, the father of Game Boy with Bandai, and they were developing this machine for the Japanese market that was a much more powerful, and in fact it's kind of comparable to Game Boy Advance in terms of what it's capable of doing. It's a really nice little machine. It did start off as black and white, but they went color and then so on and so forth. It actually found a decent market. There's a lot of games released for the Wonder Swan in Japan.
Yeah. It's a pretty interesting platform to delve into, and it runs at 75 hertz.
Yep, exactly. Which is really, really interesting. So obviously, the market was heating up at this point, and I think the Game Boy Color was not viewed as like able to compete with that type of hardware at the time. And so obviously Nintendo, wanting to sort of push forward with development, continued to work on this system, and it would eventually launch in 2001. So March 2001. And this was an exciting time just in general, right? Because 2001 was the year. So the PlayStation 2 was about to enjoy its best, like just insane first full year, right? 2001 would be a banner year for PS2. Nintendo had their own GameCube coming out later that year. Microsoft was entering the arena with the Xbox. And while Sega had killed off Dreamcast earlier in the year, I think there were still a lot of Dreamcast fans around, and not every
Oh, yeah.
Dreamcast game had been released yet. So it still had a little life in it. It was an exciting time, I think, in general. And here comes the successor to the very popular Game Boy. And it hit at a perfect time when, portable hardware in general was really taking off. We had all this sort of obviously CD players and whatnot, but MP3 players were starting to come into their own. Transparent hardware, things like the iMac, that was popular at the time, which was a perfect fit for what we got here. It just seemed like a great time for portable hardware, and the GBA itself was indeed, like that original Project Atlantis prototype, a 32-bit processor, but it's an ARM processor, which is really interesting.
Is there any real sound hardware on this thing?
Well, yes, the Game Boy Color sound hardware is on it.
Right.
Right. So the hardware in general is very interesting. So let's quickly touch on that. So this is big change, obviously, as you would know, is that they switched from the vertical form factor to the horizontal form factor, which I think is an awesome change. I feel it's very comfortable.
Very comfortable.
The LCD screen itself became wider. It's a 3:2 aspect ratio, 240 by 160 pixels, which was very specifically selected to fit the original Game Boy resolution title within that pixel window, I believe, right? It's just high enough so that you get a wider view of games, but it's not so high that original Game Boy games aren't a postage stamp.
Yeah.
Right. I actually think that drove a lot of the decisions on the screen resolution, right? Like people lament the fact that the resolution is lower than Super NES. So ports from that system suffer from cropping, right? But if they had actually targeted that higher resolution, it would have been very detrimental to original Game Boy games, which I do think was still very important to them.
Yeah, especially in the wake of Pokemon.
It's interesting, as we get into the launch games, Super Mario Advance actually starts off with an intro that has the original Game Boy resolution is just a little sort of rectangle in the screen, and then it expands to show the full view. And so it's a kind of interesting actually to see Nintendo kind of really focusing on that like new hardware feature in their own launch software.
Mhm.
Exactly. And that's what I love about launch games is that's exactly the time period when you see things like this, where they're still excited about the new hardware, nothing's been established, and developers all take these random like shots at just doing something fun. And even Nintendo got in on the action, and I love it. It's great. Obviously, the big change here then to the screen is that it is also color, but it was not backlit.
Yep.
Or frontlit, for that matter.
Or frontlit.
The Game Boy Color screen is of a very similar quality, with like nearly perfect motion clarity on both the launch GBA screen and the GBC screen. But I don't know exactly what the technical difference is, but the GBC screen is much lighter when you are, viewing it in good light. It's much easier to see. And that was definitely a common criticism at the time. Although I myself, I didn't really notice it. I kind of just blamed Castlevania for why it was so dark. But it didn't click until more recently that there actually is. If you hold these side by side, it's pretty noticeable that the GBC screen is easier to see. I don't know why they had to go in that direction.
Later on, games would come with different kind of color modes so that it would look good on different versions of the Game Boy Advance.
Right. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is the big one that comes to mind for that.
Unfortunately, with the deeper color depth and some changes to the way that the screen worked, it is darker. It doesn't reflect light in the same way. Certainly not on par even with the original Game Boy, I would argue. It's just harder to see. Even with direct light outdoors, it's not a simple screen to see. And I think this was felt more acutely than before, just due to the situation with the market at that time. We were starting to see more backlit screens or front lit screens and other devices, and then this comes along and it's just ridiculously hard to see.
But that motion clarity.
But that's the thing, right? It's like this generation of TFT LCDs had that advantage where without a backlight, they actually do display functionally perfect motion clarity. I know that they both use some sort of like interlacing as well, which is interesting that you can see when you turn it off. But however it works, this is closer to like CRT like motion clarity, and it's really fascinating to see when you play a fast game on these original GBAs. It just looks awesome. It's super, super clear. And thankfully, this extends to the front lit GBAs, that the GBA SP that would release later, which is why amusingly, the newer, brighter AGS 101 that everybody hunted down is actually so much worse in this regard. It is brighter, but you give up all the motion clarity. It is so blurry in motion. It's honestly just shocking to see.
Yeah, you see a lot of interlacing artifacts and stuff in there.
Dude, if you play games with black borders on the AGS 101, they just like smear all over the place. It's such a mess. It's not a good screen, I would say, despite the brightness. So, but yeah, out of the gate, the lack of a front light was a real issue for the Game Boy Advance, but people still enjoyed it.
You know, the fan community took advantage or developed their own with the Afterburner mod, which was a front lit.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yep.
Screen mod.
Yeah. Well, but you know, this form factor, I think most people tend to agree it is more comfortable than the SP. I think the SP is one of the most beautiful pieces of hardware ever designed. I mean, that clamshell that closes into that clean flat square. I mean, it is a gorgeous device. And I did use it because that front lit screen was, made it much more portable and easier to use in a variety of environments. But especially those R&L buttons, not super comfortable and with, the tighter form factor. And, if I do use the GBA for something like GameCube Link functionality, I do tend to prefer that horizontal format because it feels more like a controller, right? It's a little more comfortable to hold.
I agree.
Or significantly more comfortable to hold.
One thing that I just want to throw out there, because I feel like this is the biggest shortcoming of the Game Boy Advance, is I still find it very limiting, is the fact that it had just 2 face buttons. Having 4 face buttons would have been, I feel like that would have extended the lifespan of the system by a whole bunch.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, obviously, this is like getting kind of beyond launch, but you remember the whole third pillar thing with the DS?
Yeah.
They weren't sure if the DS was really going to be a success, so they weren't publicly positioning it as the successor to the GBA, but like I think we all knew it really pretty much was. They just wanted to have an out if it did not succeed because it was so unusual comparatively. But I think the GBA could have gone on for a fair bit longer, but they were probably nervous about the PSP. So, but certainly the GBA short life was not for lack of success. I mean, it was
That's
a wildly popular system that is still thought of with much fondness. I think especially like I like the GBA a lot. But I think especially with people who are maybe a few years younger than us, like the GBA is just king to them.
Yeah. It was very popular.
It also seemed like there was a lot of like low budget games on it also. Yeah. Because I think it was just easy to make games for.
I find the GBA as a retro enthusiast, I find the GBA to be one of the least fun systems to browse for because there's just boxes of games that just like, oh my gosh, there's great stuff on there, but it's just like you have to sift through so much junk. But you know what? I bet a lot of it is actually surprisingly good. I bet there's a lot of licensed games that we have blown off that are probably actually totally good. And like I say, it's those people who were maybe a few years younger, who were maybe a little more open-minded to approaching some of those licensed games that they probably actually know of a lot of the hidden gems.
Like Ballistic X versus Sever.
Exactly like Ballistic X versus Sever. Like 100%. Spot on, my friend. One other thing you mentioned earlier, though, is the audio. And this was also kind of a sore spot for the system, where it just has a pair of 8-bit DACs in addition to the legacy hardware on the Game Boy side, right? So it didn't really have any sort of like native hardware for handling audio, which kind of left it up to the developers, and it had to be mixed on the CPU. And this was interesting in some ways because it meant that more technically competent studios could often do some really fancy stuff with the sound. And it did allow like a lot of like new uh wave data to be played back, so you could actually get voices in games and like digital audio and all kinds of stuff if you could compress it right and mix it and fit it on the cartridge. But it also meant that a lot of games ended up sounding like ultra scratchy.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're using up CPU time.
Sure, and some of them are so bafflingly bad, and we're going to get to some of these launch games where you're just like, what were you guys, like, what on earth happened here? It's genuinely shocking how bad some games can sound. At the same time, what I found that I really love is when games combine the Game Boy channels with sort of like wave data to create this weird hybrid. That stuff can sound super cool, and I really, really like that.
I remember a lot of games early on where they did heavily use that GBC sound hardware. A lot of people were reviewing and saying like, oh, this sounds old. This sounds like a Game Boy game. And now those are actually the games whose audio has aged the best, like by far, because it sounds clean. It doesn't have that scratchy GBA software audio sound.
So yeah, the original release of Game Boy, then Game Boy Advance, was in that form factor that we discussed, the horizontal framing. And it did initially ship March in Japan, and then June 11th, and then I think 22nd in Europe, or in US and Europe respectively. And I think they had a couple, was it just 2 colors? They had the sort of glacier color.
3.
And then like there was 3 colors. Okay.
It was glacier, indigo, and Arctic, which I got the Arctic. You know, that was I was kind of on the front end of the white electronics fad that Apple especially really kind of popularized.
Yeah, I feel like Glacier was probably the most popular one because that was the one I saw the most, and I seem to see those the most in the wild these days.
So yeah, I do remember this being like a sort of a big deal when it launched. It was all over stores. There was demo units in stores, which is, do you remember if the demo units had some sort of like lighting system to allow you to see the screen more easily? I don't feel like there was, but
the bright lights of the store probably.
Yeah,
helps a lot.
I
don't
have
remember
a weird
at all.
memory of going to Circuit City when I first picked one of these up and seeing the display unit and being kind of like, not really, like it was difficult to see, and it was definitely an odd one for that. In that regard,
I mean, since I already bought the system, I don't remember ever trying a GBA game in the store because it's like, well, I've got this system, I don't need to try it.
So when was your first time trying? So for me, the first time I ever actually played GBA was before the launch in America. A friend of mine in the US actually imported a Japanese unit.
Oh,
it was a friend that worked over at the GameStop that I knew. Adam was his name. It's like Adam and Nate up there. Shout out to those guys. I remember playing, he had Castlevania and a couple other games in there, and I remember playing it at his house next to his giant rear projections TV and being like, wow, it is really hard to see. But I remember also thinking this is extremely cool because I had only discovered Symphony of the Night a couple years earlier, right? Post-launch. And I loved it. It was so freaking great, right? So like seeing anything that it was even remotely in that ballpark on a portable system like this, it immediately called to me. And I was like, oh yeah, I need this system.
Yeah, well, it was, my first day with it. I want to say it was like the last day of school, or like it was definitely the last week of school before the summer, between my junior and senior years in high school. And I had it pre-ordered at FuncoLand, and I had asked my dad to pick it up because he worked somewhat close to there. But what I did not expect was not only did he pick it up along with the games I had pre-ordered, um, he actually brought it home. And so I remember, leaving early from school that day because, like I say, I think it was the last day of school, and there it was on the kitchen table, and it, at the time we lived in Delaware, and we had this like really nice sunroom, and so this was like the perfect place for my first GBA experience. Early afternoon, and just bright light everywhere in the room. So I popped in F-Zero, I popped in Castlevania, and I had a great time. And I just remembered how cool it was. The reality finally hit me. I've got Super Nintendo quality games on a handheld, and that was just so exciting for me because by this point I was like into retro already, right? I still loved playing NES. I still loved playing Super Nintendo, but I felt like Game Boy and Game Boy Color weren't quite up to what I felt the standard of even NES was. In retrospect, like I am a huge DMG fan now, but I was tired of it at the time. Like DMG era is actually my favorite Game Boy era now. But at the time, I was so ready to move on. But at the same time, it was like, here's this whole new platform that is, yes, now we know there are actually some surprisingly competent 3D games on GBA, but this was by and large a 2D system, and we had just gotten through the first 3D focused generation on consoles. And so I was just so excited. Here is a system that can carry the torch of that Super Nintendo style game design, and it's going to be around for years. I don't have to worry about 2D gaming dying off anytime soon with this system. So these were just all the thoughts that were going through my head. I was so excited to be playing this kind of game in this glorious sunroom. It was a great first experience, great first impression for me.
It's interesting you say that, Troy, because I've thought about this a lot lately. But in terms of 2D pixel art, Nintendo basically took a break, like a 5 or 6 year break, between the Virtual Boy and the GBA, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like N64 era, they were 100% all in on 3D graphics, and they basically stopped pretty much most of their development of like really high quality pixel art. Basically,
they still had Game Boy and Game Boy Color, but
I don't think that really. What I'm saying is
not
that
so much. I guess first party Nintendo.
It was stagnant. It was old style, right? Like it was still 8-bit quality. There was still a few Super NES games coming along, but like with Virtual Boy, you could actually see that there was like an evolution in terms of pixel art quality that they were capable of, and then it just stalled. When that system died, it was over, and they went all in on the 3D. So GBA essentially allowed them to sort of refocus and do it again. And you do mention that it is like Super NES quality graphics in the palm of your hand, but it's actually not quite Super NES. It's actually different. And the system, while Super NES ports weren't always perfect and it has different weaknesses, it also has capabilities that the Super NES does not have. And there's a lot of games on here that I think are way beyond what you could have realistically done on a Super NES, certainly at the speed. So it is a very unusual, interesting system because after all, it is a 32-bit ARM processor, right? It is an upgrade over what the Super NES could do in many ways,
except in sound.
And obviously the lower resolution has its own limitations, but still, it was a cool chance for Nintendo to dabble in pixel art again in a way that they kind of stopped doing on the home consoles.
Yeah.
I was very worried about pixel art and 2D gameplay styles dying off. And obviously in the long term, that has not been a concern. It's always found a way to come back. But up until the indie game revolution, I was always very worried about like when is going to be the last gasp of 2D game design. And it was a big moment of hope for me.
As a big Sega Saturn fan, I was right there with you. I loved all the 2D stuff there, and watching it kind of fade away was a bummer. But what about you, Corey? What did you think? When did you first experience Game Boy Advance?
So my first experience with the Game Boy Advance was on the show floor at E3 2001. At that time, I was doing video for a website called The Next Level, and I was able to go to E3 in 2001, and it was cool. It was very cool, along with playing all these other games and like playing the Xbox for the first time, playing the GameCube for the first time, and also playing the Game Boy Advance for the first time. I feel like I don't remember what the exact setup was for the Game Boy Advance to make it so you could see the screen. I feel like it was doing something so it was also on a TV, on a monitor at the same time.
Oh,
Because I
yes.
specifically remember seeing the port of Breath of Fire running on one of those, like on a screen at the same time. Maybe like a wide boy or whatever they were probably called at whatever they were using at the time.
Yeah.
But it was left a big impression. I was obviously going to buy it day one because I never owned a Game Boy or a Game Boy Color. The only portable hardware that I'd owned up until that point was the Atari Lynx.
Really?
So I was pretty excited about it. Yeah, it's
Wow.
weird, right? Isn't that weird?
It's
It
so
is.
weird, dude.
It
I
is
love
weird.
it though. That's great.
Yeah, it's such a weird path to take to get this, but I was very excited about it. I love Super Nintendo, so I was excited to see ports of games that I had played on the Super Nintendo and maybe had gotten rid of or sold or whatever to afford other games. So I think about Breath of Fire, playing that at E3, and it's funny because I got to do this. I waited in line for a very long time to do this big spinner thing, a big like Wheel of Fortune thing, and I won these like a foam Game Boy Advance and a foam GameCube, and I still have the foam Game Boy Advance here. It's it's very much worse for wear at this point. It's basically split in half. I did sell the GameCube on eBay like a couple of years later for a decent amount, and I wish that I still had that though.
I feel like, Corey, you wanted at some point to do a April Fool's video that was called "The Softest Game Boy Advance Ever."
Yes, something like that. It's basically split in half though. I mean, this thing is in rough shape, and I think it's just might be breaking down from just being exposed to the air for so long. Yeah, the elements. Because I certainly didn't treat it poorly. It just
like
just
a
broke
stress.
apart.
It's like a GBA stress ball.
If you did go ahead and pre-order the Game Boy Advance back in the day, what did you get? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about next. And this is the part of the show where we're going to go through each of the games. I've placed them all on this list. I've actually played all of these to varying degrees and have some things to say because I think, as I noted earlier, the software at launch reveals a lot about the thinking at the time, what developers were trying to do, what they saw in terms of potential with the system, often either taking advantage of hardware features or just trying new ideas that weren't possible before, or just, something more classic. So let's go ahead and get into it. So, gentlemen, I don't know if you knew this, but of the three main regions for Game Boy Advance, the one with the most software at launch, despite being first, was in fact Japan.
That is crazy. And this launch lineup is kind of insane. It is a lot of games across all these regions, but you're right. Japan has a number of games that and a couple that I did come out in other regions later, but I did not know were launch games in Japan. So
yes, indeed. I guess that need to localize delayed them in other regions. So one of the cool things about the Japanese GBA games I find is that they come in these amazing little boxes. They're sort of like small rectangular shaped boxes where the cartridge, which is much smaller format than the original Game Boy, slots into that little cardboard bit, and the manual and other documents are slotted in behind it. and I've just loved the form factor and visual design of Japanese GBA games.
It's a bigger box actually than the Japanese Game Boy games, but the aspect ratio is maybe more similar to a miniaturized Famicom game box.
Right, exactly. They're more rectangular as opposed to square like.
Yeah.
And it's a cool form factor. And there's a lot of nice art adorning the covers of these games. And now going in sort of alphabetical order here, I wanted to start with I guess one of the biggest titles and actually one of the biggest makers. So Konami has an obscene number of games released alongside the Game Boy Advance. Like it's genuinely surprising. I didn't realize just how many games Konami released at launch, but boy, they did. And the first and arguably biggest one was Akumajo Dracula, Circle of the Moon, which is the portable Castlevania game. Have you guys played this? I assume yes.
Yeah. I mean, I've beaten it.
I'm sure all of us.
Yeah, I've beaten it once
had
or
this
twice.
one ordered when we got our system.
Yeah, and
Yeah, exactly.
it was really cool to see a game like you, John. It wasn't that much before then that I discovered Castlevania Symphony of the Night and was like, oh man, this is crazy. It's like Super Metroid. And so it was cool to see that again. Although this game is actually kind of maybe the black sheep of the Egavanias. At the time, I loved it, but it's a little harder to go back to. It's got a very stiff control style, but you know, it's at the time it seemed really special. I thought
the weird thing is I feel like his left and right movement is much slower than his vertical jumping movement. Like when you jump in this game, you jump. He goes up really high.
Oh yeah, there's
even
a move
scrolling the screen.
There's a move you get later on where you just like I think fly up to the ceiling, like you go like a rocket.
Yeah.
And that's one of the weird things. The game's controls do feel different than usual Castlevania titles, I would say. It's not bad, it's just kind of different, right?
I think at the time I almost saw it as like a blending. This isn't accurate, but almost a blending of like Symphony of the Night level design with more classic style gameplay, because it does have that somewhat stiff feel of classic Castlevanias, but it's stiffer than
Doesn't
that.
have like the dash or anything like that.
Well, no, you can double tap to run.
Oh yeah, you can double tap, but it's not. It doesn't have the
to
dodge, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Which but I mean, it's also a big change from Symphony of the Night because you couldn't use a whip in Symphony of the Night, and here you are going back.
True. But
cool.
the general like walk cycle of the sprite animation is it's very basic, and the walk and run animation, you feel very stiff in this game. But after you sit down with it for a while, you know, you can readapt. But it is a harder game to go back to. But I loved it at the time.
Yeah, and I guess that was kind of one of the noticeable downgrades, especially coming from Symphony of the Night with its phenomenal animation on Alucard, that, you just had very few frames of animation on the character, so everything felt a little bit stiff comparatively, even compared to some of the older Castlevania games. It didn't move quite as smoothly, but it was still an interesting game. This was a game that utilized a lot of digital sound samples to do the music, pulling stuff in often from the N64 game, I believe, and other sources as well, possibly.
Yeah, there's like a lot of remixed music in it, and at the time, I thought it sounded pretty good.
And that's the thing, right? It is scratchy and lo-fi, but it's catchy, and hearing this sort of digitized audio on a GBA game was impressive, actually.
Yeah.
So in terms of the visual and audio design, it did feel like a significant upgrade from where Castlevania had been on prior portable systems. I mean, especially, I love Castlevania 2 on the original Game Boy, but it's a very stiff little game. And then Legends, was it Castlevania Legends, I guess? That came out on the Game Boy as well. Very janky feeling game, of course. So this was a huge upgrade from that. But of course, it does have that, I think it's the DSS kind of like card system thing going on.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Which it's okay. And I wondered if they were inspired by like some of the popular like card battling stuff and we're thinking about, cards. I don't know. There was,
Yeah.
I'd love to know why they went with that system, but it's not my favorite part of the game. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah,
I totally
I feel like
forgot
that's
about that,
something that.
honestly.
Yeah, I forgot about it also. Yeah, I think that is something that all the Castlevania games on the GBA are going after. Is they're going after what fits really well for like a portable experience, I guess. Yeah, like trading things. They wanted people to be able to trade this stuff. I don't know if they were tradable, like the cards were tradable or not. I'm thinking more like Aria of Sorrow, where you could trade the souls and stuff. But they wanted to have portable, focused gameplay additions, I think.
And I think that's kind of what they did. And so that's maybe not the best part of it. And also I feel like the actual level design and visual design of the levels is a little less interesting than some of the other games, where it all kind of feels samey to a degree.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
But you know what? At the end of the day, this was only the first game to follow the sort of the style of Symphony of the Night. So at the time, it was cool to see them do something like that again. Regardless, we didn't have all of the rest of the GBA era, the DS era to compare it to. So
yeah,
and I would also say
it was good. I thought.
I also love that by the end of the game, like your like whole movement system, like between you're running, you're slamming vertically into ceilings, you're wall jumping, like you actually feel very athletic in this game.
Yeah, I mean,
it's fun to move around.
That rocket jump is, I think,
I love that.
Very iconic. I mean, for all this game's faults in control mechanics, that feels good.
Do you remember the horse enemies where it's like half a horse?
Oh yeah.
His rib cage hanging out. It's just like front legs.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Well, I mean,
this game this game's pretty tough. I remember it being a lot more difficult than Symphony of the Night was.
Symphony of the Night is easy to break.
Yeah, it's not Symphony of the Night was not a terribly difficult game, I would argue, and the series was known for being difficult up to that point, so it was kind of a left turn there. So this kind of feels like they were bringing it back to the more old school Castlevania in terms of challenge.
Like I say, this game more than any of the other Igavanas, I think feels like kind of like a midway point between Symphony and the more classic style.
But that's Circle of the Moon. I think we spent enough time on that because it was like a real highlight of what the system had to offer. And it's not perfect, but I still like it.
Yeah,
I think
it's absolutely the launch game I was most excited for at the time.
Yeah,
and you get to play as Nathan. Who doesn't know that?
No Belmonts here.
But all right, next up on the list, Choo Choo Rocket. Now, this is an odd one because Choo Choo Rocket was a Sonic Team developed Dreamcast game. And it was one of my favorite sort of like 4-player multiplayer games on the Dreamcast. I admit I played a lot of Choo Choo Rocket. It's so much fun. And the idea here was to bring that experience to the GBA at launch. And it is a game that I guess could be networked using a link cable between 4 systems. And you could sort of relive that experience. The difference here, though, is that the concept was reborn with 2D sprites as opposed to polygon graphics. Because the original Choo Choo Rocket, while it was a 2D game with these like cursors you move around to place the arrows, it was actually 3D polygons, and the camera could actually go down after a match and you see the whole board, but it still works just fine as 2D pixel art. The problem with this game, and I don't know how much time you spent with it, is that the GBA, as you noted, Coury, doesn't have 4 face buttons. And the Dreamcast version specifically used that diamond-shaped layout to place the arrows. And that was key for directly placing the direction you would want. You would basically use the left stick to move the cursor, select a block, hit the corresponding face button to place the arrow in the direction you want the mice to go. That's not possible in GBA. And like the cycling, the kind of system they came up with instead, I feel is way less elegant. Like it's still playable, but it's really lacking those buttons, man.
It would have made a big difference. I feel like this is one of the first Sega games to be released on, somebody else's hardware.
Actually, yeah, that's probably the more important point here, right? Because this is March 2001, so this is like 2 months after, even less than 2 months after Sega announced the end of
Wow.
Dreamcast, right? So this is still very
Wow.
fresh. Uh, I don't know for sure, but I wonder if this is the first Sega
It very well could be. I
game
mean, I
released
think
on a Nintendo system.
I really think about it, how, seeing this in the store and saying like, wow, this is really weird seeing a Sega
Yeah,
game
yeah,
on
yeah.
this platform. And
Well,
realistically, who knows how long they were working on it for, but this is basically one of the easiest things they could have done.
yeah.
They could have ported that to this hardware.
Well, there were some Sega games on Famicom, right?
Yeah, but that's done by somebody else. Somebody else. It's a Sega doing it
Right,
themselves.
right.
It does seem to be the case that Choo Choo Rocket was the first post Dreamcast. I mean, technically Sega had stuff on other platforms like Sonic Pocket Adventure on Neo Geo Pocket Color, for instance, right? But that was kind of a different relationship there, and it was kind of like coexisting alongside the Dreamcast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
'cause
wonder
they had
what kind of negotiations though as a technically as a competitor that they had to do to get a development kit in time to do this game in time for
Well,
launch.
I would imagine it's similar, as I noted, that they did have partnerships in the portable space at that point, previously Neo
Mhm.
Geo Pocket. And I'd say it's probably fairly easy for them to go to Nintendo and be like, hey, we want to develop for your portable system because we do not have a portable system,
yeah,
Sure.
right? So it makes sense that GBA would be the first system to have a Sega game released post Dreamcast.
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just the easiest one. Just makes sense for that platform.
Next up is a game that I assume you guys have no experience with, but it was a launch game, of course. And this is another one, the second game on the list from Konami. And it's the JGTO Konin Golf Master Japan Golf Tour. This is a golf game for the GBA with some really nice sort of visuals. And now I actually think golf on a portable system, it had existed for a while. It was on the Game Boy as well, and there was actually a really nice version of Neo Turf Masters for the Neo Geo Pocket Color that had been released. But Konami here with this game takes a pretty interesting approach to visual design that is both awesome but also mixed depending on which aspect you're looking at. So with any golf game, kind of, you would often have sort of like the view of the golfer themselves on the green, right? And then you have to cut away and show the ball flying across the course and landing near the hole. And so they usually break up the visuals between the two. And in the early days, they often would find there's different approaches to this, right? Like Neo Turf Masters obviously used a lot of 2D graphics for that top down sort of like pixel art view for the ball flying across the green, but you'd actually see your golfer up close otherwise. And that's kind of what they do here. So, but there's a twist basically. When you set up the ball, even though you kind of move your target with the 2D view, it actually
Mhm.
uses sort of like a 3D pseudo mode 7-ish, but not really, kind of like 3D view of the course.
Yeah,
And your
yeah,
character is a
Hmm.
pre-rendered sprite. So you actually get that sort of 3D perspective on the course. And then as you hit the ball, it switches to an overhead view and shows it soaring across the green up to the hole. And then as you sink it into the hole, they have like different cutaways to show up close of like, here's the ball going into the hole and whatnot. And I think it's all pretty neat to see because it is reminiscent enough of something like Neo Turf Masters.
and Hot Shots Golf esque too, or Everybody's Golf.
Exactly, everybody's golf. And that's probably where it's closer to because of the whole pre-rendered sprite look, but because it's
Right.
2D, that's what made me think of Neo Turf Masters. One thing I really like though is the way they do reflections. Basically, when the camera pans over water, they use parallax scrolling so that the water layer scrolls differently, and it looks like you're looking at a clear body of water reflecting the clouds above. And I think that's a really like slick looking visual effect.
I mean, like I've said before in our graphics effects that still impress. I think the way that golf is done on this kind of more 2D focused hardware is just really fascinating. The way that they do all of these different viewpoints, not knowing exactly where the ball may land, so it kind of has to render on the fly, right? In a sense. So yeah, I mean, it's not the best looking thing from what I'm looking at right now, but it's you know what? I think a golf game is always a good fit for a portable system.
In 2002, a year later, one of Inti Create's earlier games was actually a Kurohige no Golf Shiyoyo, as it was called. And it's actually like a golf game for the GBA that uses more like polygon-like graphics, which I think is super, super cool to see.
Whoa.
So it's like very prototypey, like flat shaded polygon graphics. So basically, this is a game that, just to get it slightly off track, this uses 2D sprites for the characters, but the world is rendered in like simple, almost Star Fox-esque 3D polygons, where it's very, very simple polygons with flat shading. But this allows them to have a fully free moving 3D camera, which was really, really cool for an early GBA title. And obviously, Inti Creates would make a lot of games on the GBA, so this was a really cool one, especially when it starts like before it'll actually show like a full 3D flyover of the course, and then the camera seamlessly zooms down. This may not have been a launch game, but I wanted to mention it. It is a significant like technical achievement over what Konami did at launch, but I do think Konami's game still looks really good for its own right. But all right, let's go ahead and move on to the next one, because I know Coury's a huge fan of this, the man himself. It's Easy Talk Shokyuhen 1 through 6. Coury, take it away.
This is an English teaching game for kids, right? It takes you on an adventure with voiceover. It's pretty wild.
As just straight off of Coury's head, absolutely not from the show notes.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I've been thinking about this game since I first played it 25 years ago.
Oh my gosh, dude. No, okay. We're kind of joking here, but this is actually, I have actually played around with this, and I do think it's kind of a fun little concept, because this kind of leans into what I mentioned earlier about developers looking at what a new hardware platform can offer and sort of taking advantage of that. This is a game designed to sort of teach English, right? But it teaches it through sort of like going through your day as a little kid, and performing almost like mini game like actions, right? But it's all done through English voiceover. Like when you first start the game, it'll be like, "Hey, good morning, get up. Why don't you go put on your like shirt or something?" So you have to go to the wardrobe, and what you're told to do is just done with just the English voiceover. And there'll be a closet full of clothes, and you move your hand cursor around, and you actually have to select the right thing based on what was spoken.
Well,
Right.
that's a fun way to do it, sure.
And
Yeah.
then there's also mini games that are involved like timing, like smashing the A button or like hitting the A button at the right time. And it's like, it's a bunch of things like, go do this action. I'm telling you how to do it in English. Can you do the action? And then sometimes they challenge you with little things like that. You're basically going through a bunch of like little bite-sized episodes that take you through the entire day. And it shows like a clock between each one where it kind of like lets you know, like, oh, it's 7 o'clock. It's time for dinner. Let's make dinner. And you go talk to your mom in the kitchen, and she's like telling you things that you need to do. And you have to do it. So for us, it's really not anything special, but it does take advantage of the GBA and allows, you have a lot of like surprisingly clear voice samples, all spoken in English. And
that's pretty cool.
It's fun. So
yeah,
you can see where the line of thinking was at the time from this developer.
Very good, Jay. Go to the bathroom.
You know, something that I guess Nintendo would lean into a lot with the DS, where it's just using this portable device as a way to teach versus just play games on.
It does seem to be done in different episodes with like 6 different cartridges.
Really?
Like I see a cartridge here that it's Easy Talk Shokyuhen 6. And each one though, it's I guess you play as J. It's J no English Adventure. As they write out.
So did they really release all 6 of these on launch day?
So there does seem to be different packages, each numbered 1 through 6, and they're all 2001, and it seems like they may have all shipped on day 1. I can't 100% confirm that. It's difficult,
That's the kind of
but
thing
it
it's
does,
so hard to confirm at this point.
right?
Yeah.
I need to look around, but either way, that does seem to be something that they were doing there. So
Yeah. And it
very
would make sense
curious
if
little release.
they would need to release so many different versions probably to store all that voice, right?
Exactly. But all right, let's move on to the next game from there. It's F-Zero Maximum Velocity. This was obviously kind of a big deal, I think, for you guys as well, because F-Zero it was very fondly remembered from Super NES and, of course, F-Zero X on N64. And having a portable F-Zero game like this right out of the gate was a pretty appealing thing, I would say, right?
Yeah, this was the other launch game that I got on day one. And, you know, it was neat because F-Zero X was already out. So it was kind of neat to go back to that original style that we hadn't seen since 1991, right? So to have what feels like a Super Nintendo version, but updated. Like the game itself is not amazing.
Mhm.
It's just weird. It feels almost like a weird knockoff of the F-Zero world because it doesn't have any of the same characters in there.
Hmm.
Everything kind of has. I trying to think of like what it's almost like steampunkish esque like look to the ships.
I don't remember there actually being any characters associated with any of the ships. I remember being a big fan of the Sly Joker. That was my go-to ship in the game. I mean, yeah, it's kind of a weird that was a very good way to put it. It's like kind of a knockoff. It yeah, this is just kind of the black sheep F-Zero for sure, but it's fun. It's good. I played quite a bit of it. And I remember actually when there are 3 GBA F-Zero games, one of which is only in Japan. But when GP Legend came out here, I remember it being quite a bit more difficult to control actually than Maximum Velocity. I did eventually kind of adapt and get into its control style, but this one was a little more pick up and play, I would say. So it was a good game for the GBA launch. F-Zero is a series that I think is just better in 3D. I think the Mode 7 stuff is cool. But
Mhm.
I think the 3D entries are better on N64 and GameCube.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
totally fair. But I still think it was cool to have this,
It
and
was
it
it was
is a
it was a big part
they
of that. Oh wow, Super Nintendo quality games in the palm of
Mhm.
my hand feeling that I got on launch day.
something that wouldn't quite happen with Mario Kart when it came to the GBA, actually,
Right.
because Mario Kart and GBA is a 30 FPS game, unlike the
Hmm.
Super NES game where
Oh,
F-Zero retains the correct 60 FPS motion. So it is as smooth as the Super NES version.
It has a different control style in that you have to tap the gas button when you're going around corners to be able to like
Feels good.
navigate. Yeah, and that's something that none of the other F-Zero games really adapted.
one weird thing about this game though, and actually I believe this is the case in all of the GBA F-Zero games. I'm not sure about the third one. But the map, the representation of the map on your HUD flickers on and off every other frame, which on had this been on a slower developed for a slower screen like the original Game Boy, that would have had kind of a bit of a transparency style effect. But the GBA screen is so responsive. I wonder if the developers didn't quite know that it was going to be such a responsive screen, because that effect doesn't convey that transparency even on an original GBA screen doesn't really convey as transparency, and certainly causes annoyances with trying to display the game in other environments today.
If you want to hear my opinion on this, go check out the DF Retro episode on F-Zero that I did some years ago, where I went through every game in that series. And boy, that was a fun video to make. So check it out. Next on our list, though, is a game that none of us are qualified to talk about. It's Fire Pro Wrestling for GBA, Fire Pro Wrestling A, I think. Uh, And to do that, of course, he may not have been able to make it for this episode, but I managed to track him down just long enough to talk about this game. It's Audi. Fire Pro Wrestling A was a launch title in Japan. And as promised, Audi is here just for this section to talk about it, because this is perhaps more important than a lot of people realize, right? This is a very important game. And even though it was launched in Japan, I don't think it was launched in other territories necessarily. Or was it?
No, it was. Yeah, it's kind of part of its legacy. Hi, by the way. You caught me just as I came back from the U.S., so I'm very happy to be here to talk about Fire Pro.
Why don't you fill me in? Because I'm not that knowledgeable on this. I have played it, and I do think it's a good Fire Pro game, and it's interesting, but there's a lot of history here.
Yeah. I mean, this came kind of as Spike took over Fire Pro. Fire Pro was originally done by Human Entertainment and by humans, importantly in this day and age. But Human had, during the PlayStation era, really kind of lost their, grounding. I don't think 3D was kind of their bread and butter. Their ideas were really solid for 2D. They had a lot of young people coming up with solid ideas. But then 3D kind of threw those ideas out the window because Human's code is kind of held by duct tape and strings. And if you play like Misurna Falls or even Fire Pro Wrestling Iron Slam 96, if you look at those games, they don't operate very well. As well as just the experimentation of Fire Pro in 3D hadn't really worked out for Human. And a lot of the people working on that went over to do the Virtual Pro Wrestling, which became the Aki engine. So there had been a splintering off there. They had kind of regained some trust with consumers with Six-Man Scramble on Saturn, Fire Pro, which, if you remember, I mean, that was one of the kind of quintessential imports on Saturn.
Yeah.
It was just
as
such
a Saturn
spectacle.
fan back in the day, I did have a friend that was super into wrestling, so we played a bunch of that on his recommendation, and yeah, it was super, super fun. You could actually hook up the multi-tap on the Saturn and get all those people in the match, which was really cool when you could do it. But yeah, that was awesome. It's a shame that never came out in the West, but again, Saturn was kind of,
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those games that really did make a dent in import numbers. I mean, it really was. I remember people here, the people who had Saturn, including myself, of course, they didn't need to be wrestling fans, but it was just one of those things where it's like, hey, this is a game where 6 people can be in the ring at the same time. It's just mayhem that you didn't see that often back then. And from there, so they got this, but they also had like Fire Pro Gaiden, which was like a scale back roster with individuals, which I don't think worked out the way they wanted to. And then Fire Pro Wrestling G came out on PlayStation. And that would be the last Fire Pro from Human. And I think the feeling was just, it did okay numbers, but it scaled back the 6-man feature from Saturn because PlayStation couldn't handle that many. And more moves, more match modes, but I think there was a feeling from consumers just like, why would I upgrade to something kind of lesser? And Human was just not in a position to survive, even though the success of Fire Pro was kind of constant. It was a sure bet for them to put a Fire Pro game. So that team got absolved by Spike, now Spike Chunsoft, in I think 1999, if not 2000. And the very first thing they did, in fact, was a card game, which I have somewhere here. I have a deck of it, but it's just a plain card game from Fire Pro, which is kind of strange. But then this comes out, Fire Pro Wrestling A in Japan. And that's kind of the first outing from Spike with the original Human Fire Pro
Although
team,
I think in America it was published by BAM, if you remember them. They were...
Yep,
which also published
by
some
BAM.
Sony first-party games like Wipeout Fusion on the PS2. Like, BAM was doing stuff. As you know, it was the publishing arm of Bam Margera's estate. And wait, no, wrong Bam.
That's not true. This is hogwash and lies. But it was actually done by Bam Bam Bigelow.
Okay, yes,
Thank you very much. But yeah, Fire Pro Wrestling. I don't think that was a launch game, though, in the West, correct?
Fire Pro Wrestling?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Let me just double check the list here.
I'm
That's
pretty
what
sure
I just said earlier, but then you made me... Actually, it was. Okay. Yeah,
in the West?
So okay, it does seem like I was unsure about that, but it does seem like Fire Pro Wrestling was a launch title in America as well, but not Europe.
In America, that would make sense because I never saw this on shelves. I would have liked to, but I did not. But yeah, this is the kind of. It was promoted, by the way, John. The Fire Pro Wrestling A. The A does not stand for advance. I went to see Spike many years ago to interview them for a certain project, and one of the developers on it made it very clear to me that stands for audience. So it's one of those where, remember during the DS era, it was like dual shadow and stuff like that. It wasn't DS. It was a certain kind of like different word. So it was like, oh, clever girl. They figured it out. So it's for audience. It makes sense when you look at the game itself. But yeah, this was promoted as the first portable Fire Pro, which is not correct. Fire Pro had shown up on WonderSwan. There was other kind of spin-offs, but it was kind of the fully fledged Fire Pro experience for the first time.
One could also argue that with the PC Engine GT/Turbo Express, you know.
Yeah, we're here to correct history. You're wrong, Spike. But and there had been spin-offs and stuff that used the Fire Pro template, but none had been this fleshed out. And this is actually based on Fire Pro Wrestling G. It's not based on Six Man Scramble. And I've seen some people note that like it was based on what would become Fire Pro Wrestling D. That is not correct. It is based specifically on G, which if you look at the moveset and stuff, it kind of makes sense. But it is, by and large, it is a fairly good outing. I don't think the controls have been changed due to the button layout. So I don't think it's as responsive as the sequel would come to be. So it's not my favorite Fire Pro to really fire up, no pun intended, and play. But it does have that interesting audience mode, which is like an objective-based psychology, building a match rather than winning it. You have to like do things to excite the audience, or else you get penalized for like overdoing moves and not hitting moves proper and this kind of stuff. So that's kind of the new feature that they added here, which it's interesting, but it's also fairly frustrating in execution. Again, there's neat ideas here, but it isn't the best Fire Pro outing. But it is the first one that would actually officially be released in the West under the Fire Pro.
Good timing as a launch game. So
really good. I mean, it really showcases, you know, for me, it was kind of like, hey, this is like X Premium. I had imported X Premium on Super Famicom back in the day, and this is kind of relatively close to that in terms of content, a little bit more in terms of the moves. So for me, it was kind of like, hey, it's a Super Nintendo game on a handheld, which was kind of the
that was
winning
the sentiment
formula
we talked about
Advance
so
at
far.
the time. Yeah, so it gets really close to that, even though it's based on a 32-bit game. So in that essence, it's actually more impressive because it does get kind of close to G, but G in itself is kind of scaled back from what you would expect from a PlayStation game. So, But yeah, the international release is kind of interesting because there have been attempts of doing Fire Pro in the West. The closest we ever got was Jesse Ventura's Superstars, which was on Mega Drive, which couldn't get released due to the WWF and Ventura having a spat. But that was based on Thunder Etsuden on Mega Drive. So that would have been officially the first kind of Fire Pro in the West if it came out.
Okay, so yeah, there's definitely some history to this game, and it's pretty interesting. But I guess as far as GBA wrestling games go, this or WWE Road to WrestleMania X8?
Ooh, that's not even a question. Music is pretty good in that game, though. You know, this is among the best you'll find. The international version is kind of interesting just to the changes they had to make, because like, you know, you had like Saber instead of Vader and stuff in Fire Pro, and they went pretty far in changing likenesses for the West. I'm kind of curious if the ECW or something had survived, if they could have gotten like the official license to include them, kind of like they did with Fire Pro World, if that would have changed things. Probably not. But yeah, I mean, it's It is, at the time of release, it is probably the best portable wrestling game for content. There's others I think are more fun, and I think the sequel to this is better. And GBA in general, as a wrestling platform, it is a bit uneven. There's a lot of simulations. Noah has a simulation, Dream Management, and the WWE games are barely worth mentioning. They're pretty rough across the board
sprites,
on
though, man.
GBA. I mean,
Get
they
some
love
Booker
that.
T and The Rock in there in their pre-rendered form, and it's like,
So, I mean, some of them were done by Natsume, so you'd
Right.
think there would be a little bit more to it. But they were probably kind of held by WWE at the time, how to do it, or what THQ wanted. But now, Fire Pro A, I think, definitely as a launch title, it stands pretty strong as a showcase for GBA. Kind of just showing that like a fully fledged Fire Pro could be done and can be done better, because that's the important part. Is the sequel really does blow it out of the water in kind of every aspect, which also came out in the West, but I think it's pretty hard to get now.
okay, well, thank you for educating us on the bounties or the glory of Fire Pro Wrestling on Game Boy Advance. So, all right.
I guess I should
Maybe
write
so.
a book about it someday.
Okay, so that was good to hear from Audie there. Hopefully he'll be back in the rotation soon enough. But yeah, if you're going to talk about wrestling, you got to get him on, right? So
Of course.
interesting stuff. But the next one, you guys were mentioning sort of this Mode 7 style rendering, and I guess GBA handles it a little differently than the Super NES, but it's still the same concept where you're like doing like a tile map and sort of like 3D transformation to make it look like a 3D surface. Well, we see that again in a game called Advance GTA in Japan, which in the West, I believe, was GT Advance Championship Racing. And oh boy,
GTA that is not at first I was looking at this list, I'm like
it is
wait,
not Grand Theft Auto. It is
GTA
literally just
what?
called,
That didn't
is
come
just-
out. Yeah.
it is Advanced GTA. They even spell it out in katakana, Advance GTA. Motorsports Software Technical Office present. It says
Oh, okay.
on the title screen.
Okay.
This is a super underrated
Yes. I was
track-based
surprised.
driving game that I really like this game. Essentially, it is a game where you race real licensed cars
Mhm.
around
A
the
lot
track
of them.
environment. There's a lot. They got like Honda, Mazda, Mitsubishi, Nissan, Subaru, Suzuki, Toyota, and Daihatsu in there, and a bunch of different models to choose from. Thanks to palette swapping, you can get whatever color you desire.
Mhm.
They kind of give the cars are sprites, but they have this like sort of 3D rendered quality where they kind
Yeah.
of simulate the specular sheen inside the sprite. So as you rotate the car left and right, it actually has like a shiny effect. Plus
Yeah.
they
It's,
apply
like,
some
dithered
sort of
on
like,
it, like-
scaling to it to make it look, it's really interesting to see. It's convincing, but it's the tracks themselves are like that sort of like pseudo Mode 7-ish style with the 2D background that scrolls around, but it's so super smooth. And
Yeah,
it's
I'm
like,
looking
it just
at right
feels
now.
really satisfying,
I
It's
have
insanely high res, I think.
right?
yeah.
And it's 60
I've
FPS.
never played this before, but you're right.
Yeah.
It just looks oddly smooth and it looks really fun.
And dude,
Wow.
the drifting, I swear,
Yeah.
this game has super satisfying drifting physics, right? Like I've never slid a sprite car around a corner in a way that feels this good.
Yeah. When I
Right?
was playing it, prepping for this episode, I said to you guys, I said, I think this is a bit of a hidden gem here, because this is something that I would never even thought of playing at all at launch, just because it just had it was not even in my sphere of interest. But this is a really interesting and cool game.
It kind of the fluidity of it reminds me a little bit of Road Rash Jailbreak for GBA.
Yeah, yeah.
Which was really, really awesome and smooth. Has that same kind of quality to it, where it's just a smooth 60 FPS, a very clean sort of like pseudo 3D effects and like satisfying looking vehicle sprites, and it feels great to play. So Also, the music is interesting because this is another one that takes that combines sort of like digital samples with the Game Boy sound chip. So you kind of have this like weird contrast there, and it's actually quite good and catchy. So there's a lot of there's a lot to love in this game.
Well, it
And
looks
one that
like according to price charting, it's about $8 loose or about $23 complete. So
There you go.
let's all go get it before this episode inevitably makes the price shoot up.
Yeah, it might be a good idea because it is indeed
A hidden gem.
So next up is, guess what? Another Konami game. This one is J League Pocket. This is obviously, they're part of their football series, soccer, if you're in the US. But this is actually a football management sim done with like sort of this cartoony style, right? So this is not really a game that you play like a bunch of actual like active football and you're managing teams and such. It's extremely wordy. I went through a chunk of it, and I've never been somebody that's really super into sort of football management sim, so I'm not the target audience here. But it's a J League based soccer management game with yeah.
Not
Lots of choices to make, and actually, no, you're not playing the game. You're just watching them run back and forth when the games happen.
Well, it's a lot of menus and like small but cute looking pixel art to show what's happening, and it's completely fine. The problem is I really cannot judge this game in terms of quality because I just don't have any experience with these types of games. So I really don't know how this stacks up or what other people think. I can just say that there was a J League Spotter Soccer, I guess. There was an older J League game on Game Boy, I think. They've done this before, so, and this is obviously makes sense as a GBA launch title, but yeah.
Not surprising to see Konami do something soccer adjacent for the launch.
Their other game, though, that we'll get to later, that's also sports based, is a bit better. But J League Pocket, not for me. On the other hand, what is for me, one of my favorite launch games by far,
here we go,
is Konami's YY Racing Advance, or I guess it's Konami Crazy Racers in the West.
Yes.
And this is awesome. This is essentially a kart racer themed around Konami characters.
Can we just have a moment to play the opening music track? Like this is one of the best opening tracks like of all time, and it's a vocal track on GBA, and it sounds great.
DJ Triforce, drop the needle. Dude, that was good. I agree. I enjoyed that. That's a great track. And so is this game. This is indeed sort of a Mario Kart-ish game, but one that feels very alive and more, I guess the track layouts, the way they play with height and gaps and like different sort of like just, I guess, gimmicks makes this feel decidedly different. And all of the theming around the Konami characters is brilliant. And this all ties into, so the reason it's called YY Racing in Japan is that it sort of ties back to the Konami YY World games for the Famicom, which didn't get localized, but there was 2 of them. And they're sort of like platform action-y games. Pretty interesting.
But the main idea is it's like Konami crossover. Like you've got characters. Yeah, you've got characters.
Your Goemons, you got your Castlevania stuff in there. You've got
Metal Gear Solid is in YY Racing.
The cat from one of their music games. I'm forgetting which one. Not DDR, but like I don't know. There's so many.
There's a lot of characters in this game.
I think there's
I didn't know
Tokimeki Memorial references in here. There's a lot of great music stuff as well that they've toyed with.
Yeah, the music is great. And this game is, I think, significantly better than the Mario Kart
Mario,
that
yeah,
we did get for
significantly
GBA.
better.
And you know what? I didn't even play. This game was on my radar, but I didn't get it back in the day. I never even played this until just a few years ago,
Wow.
and you know, it still made a very strong impression. You know, it's not, you know, something that you had to play back then to appreciate. Yeah, this is a really, really good kart racer. Like, this is one of the better kind of follow-ups to Super Mario Kart on Super Nintendo that we've ever gotten in that that Mode 7 racing style. In my opinion, this is a great game. If you like the original Mario Kart, do not sleep on Konami Crazy Racers.
There's so many characters in it that U.S. audiences would have no idea.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which
Oh,
I
yeah.
think is really
funny.
interesting that they even chose to localize it. I'm guessing it's because they knew that it would fit this niche on that hardware that didn't
Right.
exist yet. So it was an easy thing for them to do. But there's so many characters in here that I can understand why it didn't probably sell that well in the U.S. or was like probably a lot of people didn't play it because they said, like, who are half of these people?
It's got my
it's
boy
got-
Gambian in it though.
They got
Yeah.
the Moai heads and what they used to count down
Yep.
Yeah.
from Gradius. Like, what
Yeah.
the heck, dude? But so
Yes.
one of the things that makes this really cool, though, from a technical standpoint, is the way that they're able to layer the different background elements together. So you look at like Super Mario Kart, right? And it's just because it's Mode 7, the playfield is a solid, right? It is a tile map. You can't really do a proper elevated style track. They tried, right? You look at the Ghost House tracks, for instance, right? It's kind of like a black void, if you will, but you don't really have like other layers on top of layers. But here they're able to do both 3D parallax as well as like the 2D background parallax, but beneath the track, including a transparent track, right? So you'll have like a floating track in this game, and you can actually see off the sides the background around you is still visible, right? So it actually looks like it's suspended in air as opposed to just like a flat surface with the background attached at the horizon line. They also do this effect with like water again, similar to their golf game, where like the water reflects the sky around it, right? So you actually see like parallaxing, like reflective clouds. And it's just like they do a lot of tricks with that I thought were cool. And I just remember there's even the freaking the stadium from their Powerful Pro series in there. They try to do.
But
oh man,
all
it's
that
just
did come at a price, though, because it runs at 30 FPS.
that just like Mario Kart would. But yes,
Yeah.
it is unfortunately 30 FPS, which it's a bummer. I would have loved to have seen this run at 60 FPS, but it is what it is. And I still think as a GBA launch title, it's really cool. And it did feel like a genuine like technical step up from what Mario Kart was on Super NES because of all that additional background parallaxing. So it made the levels feel a bit more three-dimensional, if you will.
Yeah.
So really, really cool, underrated game. And also the soundtrack is perfect. It's so good. Beyond the theme, like all the tracks during the game,
Yeah.
I think it's great. And I do
The
genuinely
Gradius level has a nice track. Yeah, it's good.
I do think this is one of the best games at the GBA launch and definitely one of the most slept on. Our next one, though, is one I think you're quite fond of this, and this is a cool series. It's Kuru Kuru Kururin, which was a launch title apparently in Japan.
Yeah, and none of these games came out in the US, although at least one of the Kururin games did come out in Europe. Yeah, I see it on our list here. This was a launch game for Europe as well. Never came out here though. Yeah, this is a little series. I'm not sure actually who the developer of this is. I believe they're Nintendo published, however. And they're kind of like
it was Aiting did it.
Oh, that's
Oh,
right.
okay.
That's
So,
right. I remember
Bloody
now.
Roar and like all various other shooting games as well, like
Yes.
Maho Daisakusen and all that.
I remember that
Right.
now. Yeah, so
Battle Garaga.
this is kind of like I believe it's kind of like Irritating Stick, which is, you're like navigating like this like rotating thing through kind of a maze, and you can use the shoulder buttons. I think that's how this works. It's been a while since I've played it, but I think you can like change the direction of how you are rotating, and you basically have to navigate the maze while your ship rotates at a set rate. So you kind of have to like wait for the right angle and to like kind of, weave your way through these tight corridors. And I just think it's a really fun, simple, arcadey kind of concept. And I think it's a perfect fit for a portable system, just something that you could do a quick level here and there, on your train commute in Japan or whatever. Yeah, it's just a fun, cute little game. And there's just 3 of these. There was a sequel on GBA called Kyururin Paradise, and then there's a GameCube game called Kyururin Squash as well. So yeah, I don't know. I just think this is just a cute, attractive,
Just deceptively fun,
simple,
deceptively
fun concept. Deep. Yeah, and a cool thing that utilizes the GBA hardware for rotation. This isn't a game concept that would have worked very well on Game Boy or Game Boy Color.
It's also, I love that there was an anecdote from the game's director who said like the whole idea came to him from like his time of moving between apartments where they would have to maneuver long tables in tight spaces.
Yeah.
And he wanted to turn that into a game basically for a while. And it was even like thought of for like, okay, I could do this on Game Boy Color and 64, but didn't quite work as they wanted. And that's how they kind of ended up shipping this on GBA.
What's weird is I've always thought of these games, the way that they work and how you can't touch the walls. And if you do it, it causes damage. I've always imagined it as like you're passing a kidney stone. And you don't want it to like...
That's why you're the man himself.
Have you ever passed a kidney stone, Corey?
No, but I mean, no. I know
I haven't either. Luckily,
yes, but that's how I always imagine it, right? Well, where you're like, passing this, and you don't want it to like hit the edge. You don't want to hit the, your internals of your bowels.
Yeah, well. In this game, you are, you're actually like a little bird piloting a ship. So, it makes sense that you don't want your wings to hit the wall, Anyway.
It's kind of like...
If someone wants to make a version where you're passing a kidney stone, I would play it.
Well, you know what, Corey? You can make it happen. Let's go to Kickstarter right now.
Oh my gosh. I was thinking that the whole idea around this little ship that you pilot reminded me of the Game Boy launch title Alleyway. How they have Mario climb into the little paddle?
Yeah. That's true.
It's the same idea there.
Yeah.
I bet after seeing this, the developers of Irritating Stick were kicking themselves. Like, this would have been even better.
Yeah.
Irritating Stick.
I mean, Irritating
what a
Stick
name.
Was based on like a Japanese game show, wasn't it? If I'm remembering correctly.
That might... I'm afraid I am not up on knowledge regarding Irritating Stick, other than having played it once and thinking this is very irritating.
I remember laughing about the game with friends back in the day, but when I finally actually tried it, I'm like, oh, this seems okay. Seems okay. It's got a weird name, but it's okay.
The next up is a game I'm sure you guys are all super familiar with. Coming to us from the developer of Tokyo Extreme Racer, Genki. It is none other than Napoleon.
Oh,
this.
I've been looking forward to talking about this one.
I know. We're finally here. We made it. We're talking about Napoleon. This actually came out, I believe, as well. It came out in Japan at launch, and then it got a French release.
Yeah.
Right? It's like specifically just a French release. And it's like the Ego of War translated. But imagine this. It's a top-down sort of real-time strategy game. You ride around, I guess, as Napoleon in real time, while also controlling the army, where you go up to troops, you like use a cursor and you kind of direct the army, and it's like an overhead top-down strategy game, right? And like you start playing and you're running around as Napoleon, commanding troops to a GBA rendition of the Marseillaise. Pardon my pronunciation there, but it's like having a strategy game set in America and you just play the Star Spangled Banner the whole time. It's like it's It's very silly and it's fun.
You know what? I have to say, I'm looking. I'm not a real RTS guy at all. But like, this is not a bad looking game. I don't think. There's a
No,
lot
not at
of
all.
smooth motion and rotation to the units. Your horse looks pretty good as it runs around, and they did a really good job uh, with the backgrounds kind of conveying a sense of depth of the hills and the perspective. It's actually quite good looking. I have to say.
See, that's the thing. I'm joking about this, but this is actually a cool game, and it looks like it's sort of that isometric perspective. So it actually feels like a portable take on like a PC strategy game from that era.
Yeah, this looks quite okay.
And actually moving, this is also when I played this, I thought back to the late 90s era of strategy games, strategy action, such as Uprising and Battlezone, the reboot of Battlezone, where the idea is that you're essentially controlling a troop on the battlefield while also commanding units. And that's basically what you do here. Now, what makes it really cool as a portable game is that each round is relatively constrained. So, like, the battlefield itself is not that large, but it makes for a really quick pace as you're like commanding troops around, and it's a cool little game. So super underrated little strategy title that I don't feel like I've ever heard anybody really talk about before.
It looks
Yeah,
Uh,
pretty
I
good, honestly.
never even heard of it until today.
so it's it even has like naval combat, right? Like when you're playing as Napoleon, you ride up to the beach on the sea, it just transitions to a sprite of a ship, and you can actually command ships around. Like it's a cool little thing, and I was surprised to see that Genki is the developer behind it, and it just shows again like there was all kinds of stuff being tried back in. And I should also note, from what I can tell here, it seems like the publisher was actually Nintendo themselves.
Oh,
Interesting.
So
huh.
Huh.
it's a first party release even, which is just, and it even supports the mobile system GB. So the mobile system GB was like some sort of like I guess it's a peripheral that was used on GBC and GBA that allowed you to essentially connect your system to a mobile phone and utilize the network, right? So it's like a service that ran only until like the end of 2002 or something. Like it didn't last long. I think some Pokemon games used it. Um, there was like, I don't know, a dozen or not much more than that titles that supported this as an option. And I feel like this was actually showcased during the reveal of GameCube and Game Boy Advance at one of the Space World conferences. So very, very strange little peripheral. And apparently Napoleon supported that. So
Wow.
what I'm saying is y'all should go check out Napoleon for the Game Boy Advance and have a good time.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a fan translation of that out there anywhere now.
So next up on the list, and this is not one that I've played a lot of, so I'm going to rely on you guys here, but this is the Battle Network Rockman EXE, the first of this. So this is during that era where we had the whole Mega Man EXE, is that what it was called in the West? It was
Battle Network.
Mega Man
Battle-
Battle Network.
So in Japan it was Battle Network, but it was Rockman EXE, presumably to indicate that Rockman is like an executable file.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the name of the actual character as well. So
It's basically Mega Man Pokemon RPG-ish kind of game.
you're kind of like an elementary school kid, and everyone is obsessed with these little battle programs, I guess. And at least in English, the writing is like so insultingly bad and childish, and I'm guessing that's largely because of the constrained text boxes. I wonder if the writing is a little better in Japanese. Hard to say, but it's a frustrating game. I have to say I only played it about maybe 10 years ago, and it was a series that it just seemed like there was new games coming out all the time, so it always seemed like, oh, when do I jump onto this? And so I decided to play this first one. There's a lot of rough edges. I don't remember specifically what a lot of my issues were with it, but it's definitely a little annoying how you kind of have to dodge things in real time, but you also have this kind of I don't remember if it was specifically cards you use, but you have like, sort of a card battle like system of like different moves you can employ, but you're kind of moving and dodging on this grid. And it seems conceptually cool, but there were just a lot of like little annoyances. And I've heard that the later games are better, but I did finish this game, but it didn't leave the greatest impression. So this is as far as I have gone with Mega Man Battle Network. But it is widely beloved. I mean, the whole series is widely beloved. I think among that audience that I think they were like the right age for GBA. These are like kind of their Mega Man. From their nostalgia era, I guess.
Yeah. And there's just so many of them that it's really hard to keep straight, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was like this Mega Man Star Force collection that recently came out.
Yeah, those are the DS versions.
I know, they're kind of related to this similar gameplay concept, I think. And I was like, what the heck? I've never even heard of this. I probably did hear of it back in the day, but I just totally forgot. So yeah, this whole sub-series is a big Mega Man blind spot for me.
Yeah, I should maybe attempt one of them because it seems like it might fit into be the kind of game that I'm kind of getting into lately. Maybe since I've found myself enjoying Pokemon, maybe I'll try a Battle Network.
Yeah, give it a go. See what you think.
Next up on the list is a game I suspect none of us have much experience with because it's from a very, I guess we could say, prolific series in Japan, but one that never really got much exposure out here. And it is part of the Momotaro series. And Momotaro is sort of a character of Japanese legend. And Hudson created their own take on this character and created a huge amount of games over the years. Perhaps the most popular are the Momotaro Dentetsu series, which is more like a train traveling board game-ish kind of thing. I haven't played enough of them to say much on it, but there's a lot of those games out there. You will find them all over the place. But this one, Momotaro Matsuri, which is a festival, of course, is actually a role-playing game.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, it actually got ported to PlayStation later, and there was even a port planned for N64 that got canned. So they were trying some stuff with this, and I only briefly played this game, I must admit, but from what I've seen, it does seem to be a somewhat traditional sort of role-playing game, which is interesting to have at the GBA launch. I don't think this was ever translated. I certainly haven't seen any sort of like English version of this, but it's yeah, I admit I can't. There's not that much I can say about this one.
Yeah, it looks
really
like there's
spent enough time with it.
It looks like there's also like some 2D side-scrolling mini games and maybe some quiz type things. So
yeah,
that would check out with the rest of the series. So this, honestly, I feel like completely unqualified to really talk about this series specifically because there's just so many Momotaro games out there. And this is just sort of like an offshoot of that series. So, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, the sprites look really nice in the battle sequences.
Because Hudson is now owned by Konami, it's also kind of funny that this is technically also kind of a Konami launch game. Yet another
counts.
one. So, but this wasn't the only sort of like RPG-ish game at launch. There's another one. It's the next one, and it's Monster Guardians. Do you guys know this one?
I don't. I'm looking at it right now, and it's kind of got this Final Fantasy Tactics-esque sort of style to it. It looks nice, but I can't tell what's going on with the gameplay.
This is Konami too.
So yes, this is also Konami, and this is actually so I did spend about 30 minutes with it. It's a very story-driven game at the beginning, but it is a tactical game where you're also like commanding monsters and such around. But it does play out these sort of like isometric strategy scenes, but it's like a singular like diorama. You're not like scrolling around a big map or anything like Final Fantasy Tactics, right? And it's active. So unlike Tactics, like when you're not opening the menu and performing commands, everything on the field is just moving around and active the whole time. And so actions are happening around you. So it's not like Tactics where everything is like completely turn based. So it's kind of like a single screen strategy RPG with like sort of a world map in between and a bunch of story sequences and various other like shops and things in between, right? It seems really well suited as for portable play because of the single scene design. So you're kind of like moving through it and you're getting kind of your story and your battles, but it's all like compartmentalized in such a way to make it reasonably pick up and play. I don't believe that this ever received any sort of translation, and it certainly wasn't released in the West, and you didn't hear anything about it really. But based on my experience with it, it actually seems like a pretty cool little game that would have been a great candidate for a Western release.
Yeah, I mean, I think the art style is very visually appealing. But the gameplay, I don't know if it would be my thing or not. It's really hard to get a read on this.
Oh, it's I only played through a few early battles, but I liked what I played, and I think it had potential. So could have been a cool little thing, especially because you're basically like you got your monsters out in this field and you got your dude on the one side and the enemies in the other, and you're kind of like fighting it out in the middle there. So it's cool. So next up on the list is part of a series that I absolutely love. It's Mr. Driller 2 specifically on Game Boy Advance. And what a cool little game to have as a launch game, because Mr. Driller, I feel like at the time, Mr. Driller in the West got a really bad rap as a result
For
of one
real.
thing: Dreamcast.
Yep.
After the release of Soul Calibur, everybody was waiting patiently for the next big Namco game to arrive. And when it was announced, it turned out to be Mr. Driller. And it was like, oh, a puzzle game? What madness is this? But guys, Mr. Driller is excellent. It was an awesome puzzle game then. There's a lot of installments now, and it's just a ton of fun. You're essentially, it is sort of like the spiritual successor to Dig Dug. You're playing as Dig Dug's son, like Taizo Hori, I think. Uh, but it's got a beautiful cartoony art style. The arcade original runs in like high resolution mode as well, so it's really, really sharp. The series has just incredible music. A lot of the soundtracks have been done by Go Shina, who is a really underrated composer that's done some. If you haven't heard some of his works, look it up. Super good stuff. But this GBA port is interesting because obviously being GBA, you lose the high resolution aspect, but I think they've done a good job translating the visuals to like a lower pixel format. It actually really retains like the character and sprite and art in a way that I think is really impressive, right? Because you're dealing with like 25% or less, like 20% of the total pixels versus the original game here on GBA. That's not a lot to work with, but they've done a great job making it work.
Probably more appealing than the PS1 version being forced into interlace mode when it really kind of shouldn't be.
Correct. So obviously, it takes a hit in terms of the audio side, but it's not too bad. But the key here is that it's freaking Mr. Driller.
We don't crap around a Mr. Driller, okay?
That's right. We don't crap around the Mr. Driller, just like we don't crap around the Frogger.
We don't do it. We don't do it.
We don't do it. So.
Although I have to confess, I Mr. Driller is a game that I've loaded up various versions many times and like played around and never really dug deeply into. So that literally was pun not intended.
If you really spend the time to learn it and understand the rules and everything, it becomes super addictive trying to make your way down to the bottom. It's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of strategy in the movement because you're essentially just digging straight down. It's all these different colored blocks, and when the blocks touch, they break apart. But like knowing where to dig, collecting the air bubbles, and strategizing as you make your way down through the levels. It's super, super fun. So this isn't the best version, but it was, a novelty to have this on a portable system. And is this Namco's only launch game? It might be.
In
I think,
Japan,
I believe it is. Did they have another game
They
elsewhere?
have Namco Museum in
Ah,
US.
yes. Okay, Namco
The
Museum. Okay.
requisite Namco
Right.
Museum.
You gotta
Has to
have
be
that.
everywhere.
Next up is a game from Artoon. This is Pinobi no Daiboken. Are you guys familiar with this one?
Oh yeah.
I'm familiar with Artoon for better or worse.
Of Blink's fame.
Well, yes, also of bad Yoshi game fame.
All right. Well, they also worked on Blue Dragon, which is cool. So this is actually Artoon's very first game. And Artoon was a studio formed by Naoto Oshima, who was one of the 3 main creators of Sonic the Hedgehog. I mean, Sonic
Wow.
was his character, right? So like he designed Sonic. He went off to he left Sega, I guess, in '99 and went on to form the studio. They also worked on The Last Story in addition to Blue Dragon. So they were involved with Sakaguchi-san.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, they've definitely done some really good stuff, but they've done some not so good stuff. But Pino B, like, can you explain the giant head thing? Like, why is his head like constantly big? I think I've tried this before, but I don't know.
Pinobi is a very weird thing. So you would think that coming from the creator of Sonic, which is a pretty iconic design, whether you like Sonic or not, you'd be like, okay, this is going to be good. But no, Pinobi is like a weird robotic bee character that is a pre-rendered sprite. So like this game is a game that leans super heavy into that pre-rendered sprite look, but not in a good way. And it's just kind of like an ugly, messy 2D platformer where each level has a goal. They're fairly short, self-contained. You're just trying to get from one end to the other, I guess. And the mechanics are okay, but every time you do sort of like a double jump, his head gets huge. And I assume this was just like a thing to show off the hardware, or like, or not necessarily show off the hardware, but like, hey, we can do this random graphical thing for some reason.
Yeah, like look at the character's reaction. Like zoom in on the character's face almost.
It's very, very strange. I never quite got it. I don't love this game.
I don't. Was this before or after the PS1 version?
So GBA version actually did come first. This was a launch title in all regions, by the way. But then I guess a little over a year later, it got ported to the original PlayStation. And that version, I think, is slightly more pleasant to look at and play because you have more screen real estate, and it just feels a little bit less, I don't know.
It feels more appropriate for that hardware, like on a bigger screen for sure.
Exactly. It's very strange in GBA.
On the smaller screen, it's almost like the pre-rendered sprites and backgrounds and everything. It looks really, really jumbled.
Yeah, it's hard to make out what you're looking at, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This does feel like it was released on the wrong platform, basically, and it's definitely much more of a PS1 thing. Although PS1 in 2002, also kind of a weird choice, so I'm not really sure what they were doing at the time. But hey, they did eventually get that sweet Microsoft money to make Blinks the Time Sweeper that same year, which is pretty cool. And by the way, those guys, Oshima-san and his partner, would go on to found Arzest.
Yeah,
a bit later, right? So after Artoon
who has also made bad Yoshi games,
who has also made bad Yoshi games,
and Balan Wonderworld.
Oh God, they did Balan Wonderworld, but they did Sonic Superstars, which is pretty good.
Yeah,
and they co-developed Fantasian as well.
Oh well,
again, they kept the Mistwalker link alive.
I do like the stuff they've done with Sakaguchi.
So it's interesting when you look at Arzest and Artoon's history, you really see like all of their business is connected to those relationships, which is that thing you always hear about Japanese business, right? It's like connected to these people know these people, and so they kind of work together on these types of projects.
Yeah,
and so I think that's kind of fun. And I don't know why they keep making those bad Yoshi games. I guess it's been a while at least, but man. Anyway, next up though, we should start booking through some of this a bit more. Another Konami joint. It's Silent Hill play novel. This is a really interesting one because this is kind of setting up the GBA as like a platform for visual novels,
right?
Which would have been tougher to pull off on the original Game Boy just due to lack of space for graphics, and
Yeah.
I guess they're able to do more here, and that's basically, I guess, it's not dissimilar to something like what Radical Dreamers is on the Super
Right.
Famicom,
That's
Right.
exactly what I was thinking of.
So it is basically that. It's like it takes Silent Hill, which was new and popular at the time. And of course, Konami had Silent Hill 2 releasing later that year, right? So it's 2001. Silent Hill 2 is in development. That's going to come out on PlayStation 2 later in the year. But before that, they've got this sort of like visual novel retelling of Silent Hill for the Game Boy Advance. And it's just like, again, a developer playing around with this new format, seeing what works. And, you know, it is what it is, right? There's not much to say about this one. It's exactly what you'd expect.
I wonder, obviously none of us would know the answer to this, but the PS1 game does have multiple endings, so I wonder if there is some gameplay in this that would lead to branching paths that you could get some of the different endings or different outcomes that are in the PS1 version.
I would love to know. I've never actually played all the way through this. I do know enough that it's, it has conversations with the characters. You face off against creatures sometimes and make choices there, but it is ultimately pretty straightforward. I'd be curious to see, though, if there is branching paths at some point. All of the artwork it shows is basically derived from like either PlayStation CGI, or it's like kind of something created for this that looks vaguely comparable.
Mhm.
So, yeah, interesting release. Did not get localized, unfortunately.
There is a fan translation though. as far
Oh,
as
wow.
I can
Okay. That's pretty cool then. While we're on the Konami train then, because we
We've
can't
been on the
stop.
Konami train the entire time, just about.
So, yeah. Next up, we have Power Pro Kun Pocket 3. So this is part of Konami's Powerful Pro Baseball series. And there's a ton of these games, and they're actually pretty good, I would say. And if you look at the modern ones, they still look awesome, but they have these very iconic characters that I'm sure you've seen before, with this sort of like oversized helmet and his like eyes kind of peeking out from under it. It's a very specific look, but the first two portable ones, the pocket ones, were actually, I believe, Game Boy Color games. And this third entry then was the launch title for GBA. And it has like sort of like story stuff going, or it's sort of like almost like sim stuff in there as well, and like mini game stuff. Like I guess it's the success mode, but there's also just straight up like this baseball. So it's platforming, adventure stuff, story stuff, and baseball all jammed in here into like this one random game. So it's a cool game to have as a launch title, I think. And it's yet another Konami game. I don't know, man. How many development kits did Konami have back then? It must have just been a ton.
Yeah.
Like
No
Nintendo
kidding.
gave them all the kits because they
Yeah.
made. It's just incredible how many games they've actually made here.
One of these dudes are also in the Konami YY Racing.
And
I think, too.
so is one of the baseball stadiums. It's a track, the actual baseball diamond track.
I gotta say, like the HD versions of these look really cool.
Yeah, they
Right?
do.
They're beautiful. I love those designs. Next up, then, Super Dodgeball Advance. It's like a GBA 16-bit take on the NES 8-bit dodgeball game, I guess, right?
Yeah. So is this is this a Kunio game?
So from what I can tell, it is connected to the older Super Dodgeball series, but it does not feature any Kunio-kun characters. But there is still sort of that developmental relationship there. So it is actually a tangentially related game. It is, as the name would suggest, but with its own specific art style. And I actually think the art style here is really good. And weirdly enough, if you told me this was like Squaresoft's Dodgeball, I would believe you. Like
Yeah.
something about the artwork really looks like like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, this is a game you hit people with dodgeballs so hard that they literally die.
Yes.
Like they turn into angels and go to heaven.
Oh my gosh. This is a fun game, and I think it's beautiful. It's a really, really good looking game with great pixel art. And most importantly, it actually runs smoothly. And that's key because everything that the like Technos Japan touched back in the day ran like butt. Like all their games ran at these horrible frame rates, like everything Kunio-kun, Double Dragon, whatever. It's all terrible.
Super
They do not
Dodgeball's a
run well.
30
Super
FPS game.
Dodgeball Is it even 30? I can't even remember.
Well,
it's super
it's
choppy.
definitely not 60.
No. I think it might even
the original,
be like,
yeah. It
might be 15 or 20 or something. It's very, very, very
Yeah.
choppy. Which was acceptable for what was happening on screen, I guess. But
a very beloved game nonetheless.
still a lot of fun, but very choppy. This one though, super smooth 60 FPS, great looking pixel art, tons of characters on screen, nice looking art direction and sound. Like it's just a really cool take on that game, even without the Kunio-kun connection.
right.
So I do like what they did here. I think this was a good launch title.
And this
did
is-
either of you play this back in the day?
I didn't play it back in the day, but I played it earlier today and found myself really enjoying it once I figured out how to play it. It took me a minute, but it's pretty fun. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's hard to tell sometimes between the different teams, like who's who, because it gets pretty chaotic, especially, I mean, right out of the gate because there's so many characters on screen. But I really enjoyed the music. And this is another game that, I've always thought about doing a video sometime about Game Boy Advance remakes of, previous games. And this is another one that's I'm going to have to add to that list because it's pretty neat.
Next one is Tweety No Hearty Party, or also known as Tweety and the Magic Jewels. So it's Tweety's Hearty Party, developed by Kotobuki System and published by Kemco. I played this and wow. At first with the Looney Tunes connection, I was thinking, oh no, is this just going to be like one of those Crazy Castle games? And I was going to laugh so hard if it was Crazy Castle, but it's not Crazy Castle. It's basically Sugoroku kind of game. It's like basically a board game. It's very strange to see as a release, and it was not well beloved at the time. The reviews were very, very poor for this game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at a video right now. I've never heard of this, but it doesn't look.
It looks pretty bad.
It's not good. Dude.
It looks.
I mean, I am
zero
open,
interest in.
I mean, I don't have interest in it, but I'm open to it being okay. But I've never tried it.
I mean, nearly every review is below 50%, and most are way lower. Like Next Generation gave it a 1. GameSpot gave it 3.2. This gets to something I wanted to talk about then, in that in the PS2 episode, we kind of established, okay, this is the worst game at the PS2 launch. I said it was Orphan Scion of Sorcery, which Audie disagreed with. I'm going to go ahead and throw it out here. I actually think this is the worst game of the whole GBA launch lineup.
I'm looking at a video of the German version of this, and I just want you to know that I've just now learned that Porky Pig's German name is Schweinchen Dick. I mean, I'm looking at it right now.
No. Oh my God. We might have to. Oh man, try.
That's right there. I'm looking at it.
Oh no. Oh my God.
Oh, here, look. I'm going to send you this screenshot right now.
I don't need to be convinced.
No,
I believe you.
I'm with you. I believe you.
Even if it's not true, it needs to be.
Schweinchen Dick. Last 2 games on the Japanese launch, and we're almost done with this. It's incredible. First of all, there's Winning Post, which is some Keiba action, which is basically horse racing. So obviously this kind of stuff's very popular in Japan.
That's on brand for Japan.
It's became more popular over here, I would say, thanks to Uma Musume.
The success of Breeding Stud.
A breeding stud from Konami. Unfortunately, this is from Koei, so we didn't get Breeding Stud Advance, which would have been pretty good. But yeah, I haven't. This is also one I loaded it up and found myself kind of like, oh yeah, it's one of these. So it does have, admittedly, a lot of nice pixel art and like good looking visuals, which makes a lot of sense for the time. So being able to do like a nice horse racing game here on GBA, not a bad thing. But I can't actually gauge its quality in comparison to other Keiba games of the era. So if you like Keiba, maybe worth checking it out. And lastly, another series I don't really care about. I don't know about you guys. It's Yu-Gi-Oh, which I guess this is another Konami thing.
It is.
Yeah, well, those have done pretty well.
And yeah,
it's these were pretty popular on the GBA. I think.
believe
there's
so.
a lot of them.
Yeah.
And all of these were compiled onto a Switch release, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days collection, I think, and it probably has this on there too.
Oh, no way,
So
really?
Yeah.
Is that recent Digital Eclipse one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know nothing about Yu-Gi-Oh, but this definitely was the era, I think, where it was like probably peak popularity, but
Yeah.
still
Just
around.
trading cards between this and Pokemon cards, that's...
But this
We're
one is a
selling like
dungeon
hotcakes.
dice, right? So this is the dungeon dice monsters. So it's actually got like dungeons and dice rolling, and you're kind of navigating these
And monsters.
and monsters. It's all there. I
Can't forget those.
Yeah, it's a very, very strange little thing. But yeah, this does seem to have been in the early days collection, which is cool.
Yeah. It's cool. I mean, this is one of those, quintessential periods of games like this that are just made to, trade cards and stuff like that with other players. Link up and do it. Yeah.
And Yu-Gi-Oh's still, I guess, going strong today, right?
Yeah.
So
It's
but that, my friends, is the Japanese launch and most of the games that launch with the system. Shortly after the launch of the Japanese Game Boy Advance, however, in June, it would arrive in North America. And there are actually a lot of shared games between them, thankfully, but there are some original titles here that did not come out at launch in Japan, and we can talk about those next. Okay, first of all, Army Men Advance. Those little green bastards are back, and you're commanding them around. This is Trip Hawkins' favorite series from 3DO.
Seriously.
No, I don't know, actually.
No, it's probably. Considering
is.
how many of these
Dude.
games released.
I've actually wondered about that, right? Because Trip, he's an older gentleman, still fit, thankfully. But he comes from a different era, and I always wondered, like, was he somebody that played with little green army men back in the day, like
probably,
the actual physical
definitely.
toys?
Oh, he had to.
And then when he heard this concept of like, hey, what if we do a video game with that? Was just like, yes, 100% on board, all day, because they
milk the crap out of that for years. We need at least 4 of these released every single year.
They made so many.
You know what though? Like I remember, for a tiny website that I used to write for back in the day, I was sent a review copy of one of these for PS1 or N64. I can't even remember, maybe a couple of them. And I didn't think they were very good. And I thought the general reputation was they weren't very good. But, I know that I've been surprised watching GameSack, which luckily I did not wish out of existence last week. It's still around, I can confirm. He's covered a number of Army Men games that he seems to think some of them are pretty okay. But it's just, there's so many. How would you even know which ones are kind of good? What I can tell you though, I'm looking at video of this Army Men Advance. It is an ugly game. Like I
actually played this. Yeah, I spent time with this as well. It's not good.
It's poop.
So first of all, I do think it's worth noting that there was between 1998 and like 2006 or so, they made like 21 Army Men games. It's just insane. In 1999 alone, 5 Army Men games. Then 1 year later, 2000, 5 Army Men games. 2001, 6 Army Men games.
I feel like the whole scheme with these had to have been that, like you were saying, like Trip Hawkins comes from that era. Like the whole scheme must have been like, okay, parents are going to remember this, and they're not going to know what to buy their kid, so they're like, oh, I recognize Army Men. I'm going the little green
Those
guys.
little green bastards.
They're just going like, yeah, kids love that stuff.
They tried to do this like Tomb Raider inspired action adventure game based on the female character who just has
Looks
green
like a
hair.
human.
Looks like a human, has green hair, and wears like a weird bikini thing. And runs around
Yeah, of
the
course,
line.
they got to make her hot, right?
Yeah, well, quote unquote hot.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like compared to the other
Yeah.
actual army men
It's
characters.
very funny.
They couldn't
It's
give her
very funny.
green skin for some reason.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
no. That game was panned, and so just like this one, which comes to us from DC Studios, as it's called, nothing to do with. It was a Canadian studio, and they made a lot of garbage. They made a lot of bad games, and this is one of them. It is essentially an overhead run and gun game. You're throwing switches to open doors and fighting dudes. The problem is with the way the mechanics work. It's one of those games where you kind of just like run into the room, an enemy immediately is right up on you. He's probably going to get a hit in, and then you just eliminate him, right? So you're just always running directly into the enemies and taking damage. There's no real strategy to it. There's no thought put into the bullet patterns or enemy placement. It's just room by room madness with these ugly, ugly visuals and just horrible combat design. There may have been good Army Men games, but this is not one of them.
No, I mean, just like the art style, just like the way these characters look as sprites is just. It's just a really I don't know what it is, but I just want to just like squeeze them and just destroy them. I do not like how they look. They are very off-putting.
It's not good, but you know what else is? So this is a lot about the North American launch. You know what else isn't good? Earthworm Jim for the Game Boy Advance.
Is that so?
Earthworm Jim.
This was made by very few people. Earlier you mentioned the Game Boy Advance is a system that could deliver a Super NES quality experience on the go. But if you played Earthworm Jim at launch, you would have thought, wow, this is nowhere near Super NES quality, because this is one of the worst ports I've seen from this era. This is so bad. Like, you know, when you think about like Granddad or like Tiny Toon 7, all those other random like Chinese knockoff games that would appear on like the Famicom. That's what this feels like. This feels like it should be Earthworm Jim 7.
Yeah.
That's like a weird knockoff game, because like most of the animation is gone. The physics and gameplay don't work correctly or the same. Like, I have muscle memory for Earthworm Jim. This game does not play like Earthworm Jim. It's completely just broken and weird. The sound is so bad, it seems broken. And that's what I don't get, actually, because the music conversion was done by Manfred Lisner from Shinen, who actually has a game on this very list, which is the opposite of Earthworm Jim in terms of being impressive. I don't know, like, there's another game on here that definitely has a story to it in terms of like why it's so bad, but this one I don't fully understand what happened or why it is what it is. Like, if you just look at this
made
in motion,
in a month,
it's
probably.
It's straight garbage.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to be honest. I kind of think Earthworm Jim is garbage.
No,
but, you know, this does look really, really terrible. I think your Granddad 7 comparison is very apt from what I'm seeing here.
It's very apt, and this would have made a terrible first impression. And beyond just everything feeling awful and animating poorly, cropping the screen as they do makes it almost unplayable. It's not good. So total failure. I mentioned Shinen earlier, and they also had a launch game, and this one is quite the opposite. It's Iridian 3D. This is cool. This is good. So this is early on in Shinen's life, right? And they're still like a partner with Nintendo.
They love hitting that Nintendo launch.
They are so good at hitting those Nintendo launches. And Iridian 3D is a 3D perspective shoot 'em up where you're moving into the screen and shooting at enemies coming your way. They've made better games than this, but this is not bad. But what makes this so, like, I guess, memorable is that it's just a visual showpiece. Yeah. It uses techniques that I feel like I saw on the Neo Geo before.
A little bit, yeah.
With there was a shooter, it's not Paul Stars. Blazing Star. Blazing
Yeah.
Star, right. So it's related to that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Where they
we
actually
talked about that a little bit in episode 2 of the
That's
podcast.
right. Yes, we did talk about that. They basically use that technique here for some of the stages to give like a 3D rendered scene that moves very smoothly and you're moving through a 3D rendered tunnel, but they allow you to sort of shift the screen in different directions based on where you fly. That allows it to kind of scroll around, making it feel like you have more control over it than you actually do. Then there's other levels where it's just like a kind of like a tile mappy style effect, like the water level over the ocean. There's ones above the clouds. Like they just do a lot of cool effects. And so as a technical showpiece with like sprite scaling, this sort of is like a really promising start to the GBA. And of course, the music is outstanding.
Yeah, and there was Iridian 2 released later, which has kind of more of like an overhead but tilted perspective, which is probably overall a bit more playable. But this definitely kind of lives up more to the 3D name. I mean, they did a really good job of just making this a smooth scrolling thing, just kind of using those repeating video frames, basically.
I feel like this was a launch game that sold a whole bunch. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people, because I
It's around.
was working at Electronics Boutique at the time, and I definitely saw a lot of people thinking this looks really, really cool. Like this felt like a big evolution for the hardware, like something you would never see on a portable up to this point.
Next up, then we have Namco Museum, but this is the Namco Museum era developed by Mass Media. They actually did Namco Museum 64, and I guess also on Dreamcast. They also worked on StarCraft 64, it seems, and tons of other random games over the years. And I got to say, it's not bad. Namco Museum on the GBA has a huge challenge, right? So the games on here is Miss Pac-Man, Pole Position, Dig Dug, Galaga, and Galaxian. But obviously the GBA is a way lower resolution than those arcade games, so you're not just going to put the direct arcade games on here, right? So they've instead had to essentially adapt them to work within the confines of the GBA screen. And I think they've done that. Like the games look good. It looks suitably like the original Pixart, just sort of more zoomed in.
It's a good choice for a pickup on day one, I think, if you want to just get a whole bunch of different games.
For sure.
In a collection.
And I think the Game Boy, original Game Boy version of Pac-Man was pretty well liked. I knew several people who had that back in the day. So,
and also because of the Game Boy Advance's ability to play back digital samples, they're able to sort of recreate the sound pretty accurately. So it sounds correct. Okay, so from Pipe Dream, and I forget the exact details around this. Like I feel like it was developed by like one person or something ridiculous. I did a DF retro on this game, but I love Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure in its original form. But I hate Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure on GBA. It is similar. In some ways it's better than Earthworm Jim. They actually have the animation frames sort of intact, but it's super zoomed in. The colors are completely boogered up, likely to overcome the I love that term, boogered up. That's it.
Like that's pretty good.
That's very much something my mom would say.
Exactly.
Like I'm boogered up.
It's boogered up, man, because it is. It's super garish. Like the greens and the purples are just like super bright looking now, and it's very, very ugly. The music's gone. It's just like random sound effects, and the game doesn't feel right to play. But again, after revisiting this today alongside Earthworm Jim, I actually do think Earthworm Jim port is much, much worse than this, actually, in retrospect. It's just a mess. This one, not good. It's probably the worst version of Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure. Even though some of the other versions have frame rate issues, just being zoomed in like this with such garish colors and completely mangled sound kind of ruins it. I don't like it. No, sir. Did any of you guys play this?
No. I've not played any version of this, but I certainly know of your love for the good versions of this game, John. I've always been curious if this is something I would like or not. It's kind of hard to tell. I lean toward thinking I probably wouldn't like this game even on its
I feel like I could help you
forms,
learn to
but
like it at some point.
Yeah.
We'll have to work on that.
Okay.
Just got to pick the right version first. While we're talking about ports like this, though, there's also I believe Digital Eclipse develops Rayman Advance, which recently appeared on the collection that they did, which makes sense. And this has many of the same problems, but I think it is significantly better than Earthworm Jim and Pitfall in that it still feels suitably like Rayman and the visuals are intact. The sound is cut back as you'd expect, and the screen is zoomed in. But if you can get over that, it's still an okay version of Rayman 1. And it's not a bad idea to release this as a launch game for the system, I think.
Yeah, I was really tempted to get this back then because I had played Rayman 2 on N64 and liked it. And but I never did. My cousin got it, but I don't think I ever tried it. Tried his copy. So
again, it's not the best version of Rayman 1, but it's an interesting version and it's much better than some of those other ports. So I give it a thumbs up. What I don't give a thumbs up though is Ready to Rumble Boxing Round 2. Ready to Rumble was like one of the premier Dreamcast launch titles, right? It was a big deal at the time. There was a lot of talk about it. It did look visually great. People loved Afro Thunder. I remember people in stores watching this at the Dreamcast kiosk getting very excited about it. Yet, of course, despite the Dreamcast association, this game the original ended up being ported all over the place. And the same is true of Ready to Rumble Boxing Round 2. But the GBA version is a very different game because obviously you're not doing the full 3D fighting of the console version. So instead, they have created pre-rendered 3D sprites with a pseudo 3D sort of like arena that's very chunky and pixelated, but it allows the camera to rotate in a 3D space, which sort of recreates the type of play from the game. The problem is it just doesn't feel good when you translate this sort of game into small 2D pre-rendered sprites. The hits don't land. It's very, very ugly and weird to play. I don't like it.
The rotating field is an interesting idea, but I think gameplay wise, boxing just doesn't make a lot of sense in 2D. I mean, I've seen it done before, more in like mini games, not like a full game so much. But can you think of any game where like 2D boxing was done that successfully?
Punch Out.
Yeah, Punch Out. I mean, does that really?
But when I say I'm talking about the perspective. I'm talking about
right.
It just I think that makes more sense. Behind the character because you got your left, you got your right, you're dodging. Like it just seems like you would be much more limited when in boxing from a side perspective. Is what I mean.
What I think is interesting about this, though, is the fact that these teams were directed to just adapt this game to something that works on this hardware, and they adapt this gameplay and put it in and put it on the system that it probably has no right being on. And I think that it's kind of neat though that they try to squash it down and just make a completely new game essentially out of it. Like sometimes you're successful and sometimes you're not.
So on a more positive note, and this one I was not 100% sure on this one. So Super Mario Advance, right? We haven't talked about this yet, and it's a big release. From what I could have sworn this was a Japanese launch title, but all the dates that I find suggest that it actually came out a little bit later, like a week or two after launch. But I don't know. It's really difficult to find this information on a whim. I was kind of looking around through launch photos from the Japanese launch of the Game Boy Advance. So just feels like this would have been a natural game to have at launch in Japan as well. But regardless, it was an early title and a launch title in other territories, such as the US. And this is Super Mario Brothers 2 as we knew it in the US. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but there's a game called Doki Doki.
You can't even say it anymore.
I can't even say it anymore, but what's basically like the Super Mario All-Stars version of the game into a GBA game and adding tons and tons and tons of voice clips and some additional bits and pieces of content. And I think, like all the Super Mario Advance games, it also has that original arcade style Super Mario Brothers. It's just Mario Brothers, not Super. Right. So yes, it has Mario Brothers in there.
And
It's like
all
a
of the
multiplayer thing.
advanced games had that version of Mario Brothers included with it. Yeah. Which was kind of, I guess kind of almost also a throwback to Mario 3, which had the mini game based on that as well. But I skipped this at the time because it just didn't seem super necessary because, the visuals are based on the Super Nintendo version, which I had access to. I also had access to the NES version. Just didn't seem like a game I needed at the time. Although I did, at the time I was, like I mentioned, between 11th and 12th grade in high school. GBA was still the main thing when I went to college, and I did start to appreciate the Super Nintendo ports because I didn't have my Super Nintendo with me in college, so I thought it was really cool. But at the time, this just didn't seem super necessary to me. So I have played a little bit of it since. But all those voices added, you get a power up is just what I needed.
I was going to say, you did not look at this game and think at launch, just what I needed. Just what I needed.
Yeah. You got Birdo speaks, right?
Oh, maybe I forget,
I'm
but
pretty sure.
Yeah.
Makes a threat at you when you first uncover.
I want to ask the game developers watching, because this is honestly something that still happens today. Like, why do you just have...
That's as far as you go. There we go.
Why do game developers think that characters need to say the same things over and over again? We don't need characters. I mean, obviously this game is an extreme example of characters talking way too much. It was panned for it at the time. But still, I just, why do developers still think we need to hear characters say the same things again and again and again? It's not interesting. Stop it. 25 years later, we don't need more of this. Have characters say way less stuff, please.
But I always thought of this as a follow-up to Super Mario Brothers Deluxe.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking that because you think it's like on the surface, it's strange. Like, why start with Mario 2? But I think you're absolutely right. And that is ultimately what led to the very strange numbering. I don't know if that numbering was carried over to all regions, but in the US, we ultimately ended up with Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Brothers 3.
Yeah, that's some Monster World 5, Wonder Boy 3, or Wonder Boy 5.
Monster World 3.
It's terrible, terrible, terrible naming and branding, but it's so silly that I am glad that that's just a dumb thing that exists in the universe.
The next one is actually one that I really like, and this actually is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 for the Game Boy Advance. Something that seemed almost impossible, right? Like, how do you bring a game like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, a fully 3D skateboarding game, to a portable system like this? Well, Vicarious Visions did it, and they did an amazing job. They essentially adapted the direct controls and the code of movement from the PlayStation games into this portable game. They draw flat shaded polygon characters on these isometric 2D backgrounds, and somehow they've managed to basically implement the full suite of controls and tricks into the game, where it does actually play like authentic 3D Tony Hawk, but from an isometric perspective. It's very smooth. It's 60 FPS, and it was just incredible to see this at the time. I think. I don't know. Do you guys remember this?
Oh yeah, it's a crazy technical achievement. I think just punching so far above its weight, and it's amazing that they were able to make this work. It's so cool. I mean, there's some issues with telling where the items you need to pick up, the floating items, exist in the 3D space, but you can usually get an idea based on their shadow. Like, by all rights, this should not have existed.
You can still kickflip TC's roof gap in school too. It's no problem. You can do it. What's kind of funny though is when you really look at what they're doing from a rendering perspective, this is essentially like taking the concept of pre-rendered backgrounds with polygon characters, the Resident Evil style, and applying it to a skateboarding game. But because of the way it's like a large play field, they're able to scroll the camera around instead, right? So it works. But it is basically the polygon character on pre-rendered background concept. So I think that's super rad that this works as well as it does.
I don't know if it was Vicarious Visions that did it, but it's a game on the GBA that uses a similar approach as Max Payne.
I don't think that they did the GBA version, but it does. You're right. It has that similar look. And I think a lot of GBA games, Jet Set Radio does the same thing.
Oh,
on
I forgot
GBA.
about that even existed.
Vicarious Visions might have worked on that. I can't recall off the top of my head, but either way, same basic thing. And it's very cool.
They clearly inspired teams based on what they were
Exactly.
doing.
That's it for the North American launch as far as unique titles. There were other games, of course, including Castlevania, Choo Choo Rocket, F-Zero, Fire Pro Wrestling, GT Advanced Championship Racing, Konami Crazy Racers, Pinobi, and Super Dodgeball that came over from the Japanese launch for North America. In Europe, then, a lot of the same titles were there. And the only one I could find that seemed quite a bit different here is something called Top Gear GT Championship, which also appears to have shipped in Japan. And some places said it was launched in Japan. Others said it came out a little bit later.
That could be going from confusion of the, Advanced GT or GT Advanced Championship Racing.
And I think we actually also missed this, is it launched under a different name in Japan as well, from what I can tell, or around that time. So, gosh, there's so many games for this system around this time. And like every source of information about this has different games listed. So like compiling and trying to pull from memory and photos. This is actually a game I don't remember at all.
This looks
Exactly.
a lot worse, though, from what I've seen.
So in Japan, this was Zen Nihon GT Senshuken, which would have been like all Japan GT championship.
Yeah.
Right.
The intro to this game really makes me feel like they were trying to make a Ridge Racer type game, because it has like this, like a girl like being like a mascot girl.
Right. I mean, that's
showing
kind of
up
just
in
a
the,
Japanese
the-
racing thing in general,
But
if
I
I'm not
mean-
mistaken.
But I'm just saying the way that it's set up is, it's just kind of, enjoying her life being part of this racing scene.
Right. But unfortunately, this game I don't like nearly as much as the other one, Advanced GTA. And this actually is still track based with sort of real cars, but they draw the track in a more old school way, like kind of like what you would see in like Outrun or something.
But I think it looks
you
a
don't-
lot worse than Outrun, and a lot worse than
it absolutely does.
even something like Rad Racer. You can
yes,
barely see in
it's
front of
ugly.
you in this. It's
No,
not
the
good.
view is cut off like right near the player.
The sense of speed is not great. What I think is very funny is your speedometer, it maxes out at around 150, but you can be going almost like you can be going so slow and it still says you're going 60.
Some people seem to have enjoyed this, but it did not review very well. And from what I played, I did not enjoy playing this. The other Advanced GTA surprised me a lot with how well it controls and how smooth it is. This was totally the opposite. And I don't think it's really a very interesting or compelling racing game at launch. So, but that was a game that also came to the US, but not until months later, like in July or something. But it was a launch title for Europe, apparently. Along with Europe also got Tweety and the Magic Jewel. Oh, joy.
Oh,
With
awesome.
our good. That's all the games, I believe, hopefully. Although with how this came together, I still feel like we probably missed a game or two somewhere.
Yeah,
It just feels like there's an inevitability to this.
Going through this list, it's definitely emblematic of the GBA as a whole. I feel like some real standout stuff, some very impressive stuff, some ports that not as much effort was put into them as could have been, some ports that a miraculous amount of effort was put into. It's just some straight up oddball misses and a little bit of licensed garbage thrown in there for good measure.
Yeah.
This is kind of what the GBA became. But it's a great system. It's got some really great games. I enjoy the hardware, but you know, it is a mixed bag.
The system was obviously a big success despite its short life, and went on and received many great games over the years, as well as many mixed games and licensed games and all kinds of random stuff. Then we would get the GBA SP and the Game Boy Micro, and I feel like GBA had a respectably long life, considering even with the DS out on the market, you could still enjoy some good old Game Boy Advance. Plus, it brought back 2D Metroid, right? Which was awesome.
Yep. And lots of fun little gimmick games like Boktai or like the Yoshi's Topsy Turvy. It was neat to see them really utilize the portable factor with these cartridges with special pieces of hardware in them.
And it served as frontlining Nintendo E3 conferences for like 3 or 4 years with connectivity. Everything. It was all about connectivity. But I will say Pac-Man Verse, pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah. And I do enjoy getting GameCubes together in multiplayer, connected to a GameCube, and doing something like Four Swords Adventures, because it is actually possible to do that in a modern era more affordably than it was back then.
Yeah.
So it's cool. It's cool. Very, very cool. I feel like there's still a lot more we could say about the system, but obviously the focus here was on the launch and the launch games. And
another time.
Well, long enough already. It was a little bit scattered, but I hope you enjoyed our journey through all these launch games, and maybe you found something you didn't know about. I think you should go play Advanced GTA.
Yeah, I'm going. I might need to go to the retro store, pick that up.
Heck yeah! So, thank you guys for joining me on this long journey through the GBA.
Yeah, of course, always.
And thank you to all patrons. Of course, you can check out the Digital Foundry Patreon over there. Come join the retro tier. We'll do Q&A sessions like we did last week once in a while, where you can ask your burning retro questions. You can hang out with us over on the Discord and chat about all this kind of stuff, and just support it to make it happen. We really appreciate those that are supporting the show, help make it possible. So thank you all for watching, and see you next time.
Take care.